So this webinar today is about reasons that you should leave your job. And most of my webinars are actually pretty positive in nature, but what's happening in the current economy is attorneys in certain practice areas like corporate securities and practice areas where technology companies tend to spend a lot of money are, with the exception of patent, are losing their jobs. And what I'm talking about today is reasons that you should leave your position if you believe that you're having issues with it. And so this is one of my favorite webinars and topics to do because I think that it's very relevant to a lot of people, and understanding this can really help you. Just as a kind of introduction, a lot of the webinars I do are more positive in nature. So I'm trying to tell you how to improve your career and things to do with your resume and just how law firms work. But this particular webinar, I think, is very important because it is at a time where people are losing jobs. And I typically don't do these kind of webinars just because I like them to be more educational in nature and not be something that would theoretically get you to apply to BCG research or something like that. But a lot of times people remain in jobs when there's signs that they could be losing their job, when there's signs that they're not going to advance, and a million different other things. And in most cases, it doesn't take a webinar like this for people to understand that. In most cases, what happens is people understand these things on their own. But at the same time, people don't understand how to look for the signs. And if you don't understand the signs, then you can definitely be in trouble and potentially lose your position. Sometimes people will also leave firms when they shouldn't leave. And I've seen this happen on numerous occasions. You could be at a firm where you really fit in, where people like you, where you can advance, and all those sorts of things. And then if you end up, for some reason, at a firm that it doesn't have those things, then it can have very negative consequences. And just as a prelude, I'll tell you, the first firm I worked at was Quinn Emanuel, and I loved the firm, and I had lots of friends there, and I was doing good work, and people liked it, and I was getting work from lots of different partners and important partners, and so I was in a very good shape. But at the time, Quinn Emanuel was a much smaller firm. It was 45 attorneys, if you can believe it, when I joined it, and it was a bunch of guys from Cravath, Swain and Moore mainly, and just really good attorneys. And I joined that firm and did very well. But then there was another firm, a New York firm, that was a branch office that I joined called Dewey Ballantine, which is no longer in existence. But that firm in Skadden and Milbank paid these salaries that were ridiculous from the going rate. So the going rate at the time, this will give you an idea of how old I am, was $85,000 a year. And then firms like Dewey and Milbank and Skadden were paying like $135,000 to $50,000 a year. So it was like almost a no-brainer. But when I did that, it gave me such a bad taste in my mouth that I ended up leaving the practice of law because it was a branch office. The partners there didn't have any work. They thought they were going to bring in a case for me to work on. They didn't. And then people that leave Quinn at the time weren't really welcome back. And so I didn't even make an effort to do that. But that should give you a sense of what can happen if you leave a firm when you shouldn't. Obviously, Quinn Emanuel was growing. People that I know stayed there and made partner, and even without business, we're making $3 million plus a year, 10, 12 years later. It would have been a very good opportunity, and I'd probably still be a lawyer. So there's some reasons that you should leave a firm. You can leave a smaller firm to a larger, more prestigious firm. And if you believe you have opportunity there, it can also dramatically increase your salary and career prospects. I'll talk more about that today, but the main reason for that is larger firms typically have larger clients. Larger clients pay more money. Larger clients allow you to work on more sophisticated matters, and larger clients set you up to go in-house if you want to later, or to move to even more prestigious firms. And there's like a really great thing on your resume that people don't necessarily have otherwise. So it's just it can dramatically change. You can go from one big firm to another big firm, and you can have a good run of a high salary and learn how to make partner at more prestigious firms and get clients you might not otherwise get. But the other side of the equation is a lot of people will leave large prestigious firms to join smaller firms or go in-house. And sometimes those career moves will actually make it very difficult for you to ever get in a major firm again. That doesn't apply so much to people in corporate and different transactional practice areas, which would be real estate, patent, ERISA, things like that. But it really does apply to litigation and a lot of others that I'll talk about today. And whenever you make a decision to leave a law firm, you're really making a decision that's going to take you either closer or farther away from whatever you're trying to do. And it's very significant because it can change your life. It changed my life by moving to a firm that wasn't good, and it can change your life as well if you make the wrong decision. This is just a statement. I used to work with Tony Robbins, and this is a type of statement he might make, but the quality of your life and your career is going to be proportional to the quality of your decisions. And every person's success is largely a product of that person's decisions, good and bad. I'll tell you an interesting story that I have learned is I was going to go to Stanford Business School at one point, and I enrolled. And then I was like, this is ridiculous, like crunching all these numbers and spreadsheets. I don't want to have anything to do with this. It's just not fun. And so I ended up withdrawing, and literally something they'd hardly ever seen. And after everything started, and then over the past several years, I've been reading articles. I read one last night about someone that I met early in the class that's a billionaire. That was maybe not the best decision. People make bad decisions. I probably would have done something similar to that, maybe. I'm probably, maybe not, but I've always been an entrepreneur, and more so than a lot of the people that I met who tended to be very numbers oriented. It's just when you look at the most successful people, it doesn't matter what the profession is. It could be law, it could be sales, it could be anything. Their life and is really the decisions you make. So you're in charge of your decisions. If you stay in a legal market without a lot of opportunity, you may not have fun. You may make worse decisions. For example, I am from Detroit. I clerked for a federal district judge in Detroit. Had I stayed there, where there's only, at the time, there were like only 5 big law firms, which was like Miller Canfield, O'Connor McMiller, Dyke McGossett, and then Plunkett Cooney and Butzel Long. This is what happened at the time. That would have been a bad decision probably, because I would have had different clients. I would have not made as much money. I would be in Detroit. I would never have learned about the profession that I'm in now, legal placement. I probably wouldn't have got into Stanford Business School because I wouldn't have had the entrepreneur. The life you have is literally a product of the decisions you make. It's a product of the markets you're in. It's the product of whether you use a recruiter or not. It's the product of the type of jobs you apply to. It's a product of the opportunities. And so all these decisions are very important. And there's really no way to get ahead many times if you're in a position that you don't see as benefiting you in the long term than to move firms or move markets even. So people move markets all the time. I was talking to an attorney yesterday in Columbus that miraculously has gotten a position at a very good firm and a very good practice area, and didn't go to maybe went to a top 50 or maybe it's top 75 law school, and is now set up and did average in law school, meaning average grades, and somehow got this position by contacting a recruiter, not myself, and got it. And now, because of the practice area he's in, he can move to pretty much the biggest firms in New York, not Davis Polk and Paul Weiss and those sort of things, but he can move to some very good firms, or Los Angeles, probably not Los Angeles, not a bar, but all around the country, Chicago, Houston. And the decisions you make really are very important. You need to think through the decisions you make. Sometimes people quit jobs because they're mad at their firm, or they think that it's just an unpleasant place to work. And that decision is another huge one. That can prevent you from getting another job because people think you're fired or can't get along in a different atmosphere. You spend the majority of your life at work. So you commute to work, maybe you work remotely, but you interact with people at work. People are mean to you or nice to you or both. And you can get ahead and advance your family and your self-esteem and your career based on your job. And there's a lot of very good arguments that could be made for staying at your firm, but there's also a lot of reasons that I'm going to go over right now that I hope everyone absorbs and understands. And by the way, this webinar is live. As you listen to things, you might want to write them down in a Word document or on a piece of paper and see how these things apply to you. And then in addition, I recommend trying to find questions about what I'm saying. If it doesn't make sense or you think that there's reasons that you may need more clarification, or you can just ask questions about anything. People ask questions about why they should move firms or what something means when someone says something to them. So they ask questions about that. So please take notes, answer questions, because this should guide your thinking in terms of the types of things you look at. So the first one are people that we work with that I believe there's two types of attorneys. So there's basically ones that are motivated by trying to trade up, and there's those who are trying to trade down. And what does that mean? That means that people, all they want to do is trade up, and there's people that all they want to do is trade down. People want to trade up because they believe that they can challenge themselves at a higher level, and they want to compete with better attorneys, and they feel that they're up to it. And then there are those who are trying to trade down and may be beyond their ability to succeed at the firm they're at. I'd like to tell a quick story about this trading up and trading down. When imagine that you were, and there's a really good Malcolm Gladwell book about this, and I'm not going to say the way he describes it, but I will describe the generality because I don't want to offend anybody. But he says that some people are admitted to different schools and that are not believed to perform well. The firm doesn't expect them to perform well. So if somebody is admitted to Harvard, for example, and they're an athlete, they may be admitted with the expectation that they're going to be not in the top of their class or even at the bottom. Now, some of them aren't, of course, but they're looking more at the person's athletic ability than they're looking at the person's skill academics. Certainly, you have to have good academics, and there's minimum LSAT, PAs, and things. That's how they look at people. So athletes are admitted with the expectation that they're not going to get the best grades. And I see people that went to Harvard and Stanford and Princeton and all these people all the time that ended up at like third or fourth tier law schools just because they were in an environment that was beyond that they weren't suited for. There's also people that are admitted to schools, undergraduate schools, where they may be batting below their average. So they may go to a local law school and be first in their class, or they may have gone to Princeton or something but they go to a local law school and are at the very top of the class. So there's certain people that are in jobs that are potentially, if someone from a fourth tier law school or third tier law school without the greatest motivation or skills goes to a firm that's way above them, they probably are going to have a hard time trading up because they're not performing at the level of their peers. And if you go to, you may want to actually trade down. So people are in different firms based on many times their skill level. You may feel that I think it may be called the Peter Principle. You may have been advanced beyond, you may be at a firm beyond your capabilities where you're getting basically maxed out and you're not performing at that level, in which case you're going to have a lot better luck trading down. That analogy that Malcolm Gladwell gives, and I'm sorry to spend so much time on this, but it's very important. The analogy that Malcolm Gladwell gives is he says that the people that are admitted to colleges that are beyond, where the people are much smarter than them as a general rule with higher SAT scores and grades and more potential, may want to go in and major in something like pre-med, but because of their experience, they are not able to pass those classes, so they end up maybe doing English or something, whereas if they'd gone to a much better school, they wouldn't necessarily be in that type of practice area. They would have been doctors instead of succeed. So sometimes you may want to go into a firm that's less. And if you're maxing out and you can do better, like you did first in your class or really high to fourth level, third, fourth, or second tier, or even first tier, bottom law school, you could probably trade up. Law firms love people that are trying to trade up, by the way, because there's this whole principle that people just respect people more when they're trying to trade up. They believe that they're going to make better attorneys because they try hard. A lot of people don't get into the best firms out of law school, but they concentrate in the practice area. And law firms like people trying to trade up because they assume they're going to be hungrier. And a lot of the new associates, I'm sure if you're in a top firm, you're 1, 2, 3 firm, you start, or 1, 2 to 3 years, you may get exhausted by the firm that you're in. and start talking negatively or taking things for granted or complaining about things. And so they love attorneys that are trying to trade up. But if a law firm thinks you're trying to trade down, they will start believing that maybe your skill wasn't as good as it could have been at a top firm, and therefore you are willing to accept less because you want to make sure you succeed, or maybe you're having problems getting a job with another top firm, or maybe you're just unsatisfied with the practice of law and you want to go somewhere with better hours or something else. And so the law firms often believe if you're trading down, that there may be a problem with you and you may want to leave the law firm environment entirely. Now, some people will say with good reason that they want to get a position with a firm that where they can get business and or they want to get a position closer to their home or their family someplace. But in general, people do look at you suspiciously sometimes when you're trying to trade down. And so you just have to be careful with that. Most of the time when people trade down, not all the time, but a decent percent of the time, they often come to me and want to trade back up. And firms are scared of that because people during recessions will always try to trade down, which is actually very effective if you're losing your job at a big firm in a recession. So I always recommend it. Trading down actually means probably looking in the suburbs of a major city or looking in even smaller markets. But you need to be careful. But the people that get the most jobs that work with me as a recruiter, and I say this because this is just how it works. Now, this is mainly for jobs in your current market, but it can also apply to firms in other markets. But the people that get the most jobs, if I look at their resume and I see what they're trying to do, and I write about them to the firms, and I talk about this to the firms, those people that want to be in a more prestigious firm and challenge themselves typically move up and do very well. And this desire is something that the law firms love. How much do they love it? I had one candidate a few years ago. Actually, you know what? He wasn't a candidate. He was someone that I was coaching. And I have a coaching business, but I don't, and again, I'm not going to promote it here, but the point is that he had started out, I think he failed the bar 2 times in California or something. And he didn't get a job as a summer associate. He went to a top law school and then he got a position at a small firm. And when he failed the bar the first time, they were like, you can stay. And then we failed the bar the second time. They said, you can stay. But once he passed the bar, and from the second he didn't pass the bar, the second he got at this firm, it wasn't a great firm. It was a firm that, frankly, he felt was embarrassing based on the quality of law school he went to. He moved to a new firm, like a little bit better firm. Then he moved to a little bit better firm. And then he started getting business. And then he moved to a better firm. And so 5 firms in, after 8 or 9 years, he was at one of the top probably 10 or 15 most prestigious law firms in the United States because he kept improving, kept moving, and law firms love that when you're trying to get in a more prestigious firm. And they're going to take a chance because they know you're going to work harder, they know you're motivated, and they can channel that into a new firm and do very well. So that means a lot of things. It means you may be doing insurance defense and want to do commercial litigation. So you have a real desire for that. And you can say that you want to work on bigger cases. These are the best hires for firms. And the lateral market really at the highest level, like people moving between AmLaw and 100 law firms, functions like that, but not completely. But it actually, the lateral market functions like this in great part for attorneys at not your AmLaw necessarily 100 law firms, but attorneys trying to move to better and better. Firms love it. And you can get indoctrinated in the firm pecking order because you're going to get most attorneys, and I'm just telling you how it is, apply to 100 firms or in law school, and they might get 1 or 2 interviews, or they might apply to 500 firms. So you get you get rejected, you feel like you're not good enough, you feel like your law school is not good enough. But once you get into law firms, your grades stop mattering for the most part, and they're looking at your practice area and your motivation to work in a better firm. And this is a great way to get ahead. These are people that always get ahead. But I want to be very clear with you. In order to get ahead this way, you need to have a resume that's focused typically on one practice area. You can't say you do 5 different things. The law firm has to believe that you're an expert in something. The idea of the more prestigious firm is that the market will respect you more. You will get better jobs next time, and you can move into working where you're doing better clients. and more important work and make more money. What does it mean to work on more important clients? More important clients have a lot more money to spend, which means you can go farther in depth. You can investigate the law. You can spend days writing memos and making sure you've done the best work, whereas in smaller firms, the clients are willing to pay that. And I think the ability to work in a more prestigious firm is among the most important reasons that anyone should work. And this ability was something that carries a ton of weight and gives you a very good reason to move, and that you should. Every week, we place people from smaller markets and smaller firms, from firms you wouldn't have known, into large prestigious firms. And these firms are life-changing. The people, break down and cry. They scream, on calls. They're just amazed, and because they know, how important it can be. They can change your salary, they can change your future, and also they change the type of attorney you are, because you learn about your practice area in more depth. You learn from people that do much better work, and it's a real major advantage for you if you're able to do that. It can really change everything. If a second-year associate from a small firm moves to a larger market, or a larger firm, they can suddenly be making more money. They can get better experience. They can get world-class training and the opportunity to work on major matters. It's the same thing with larger cities. People move from small cities to large cities all the time. And that's also a really good idea. That can change your career. What's really awesome about lateraling between law firms as an associate is that you're just going to be evaluated as a much different way than you were evaluated as a law student. So law students are evaluated just on their grades and the quality of whether some are associate and the quality of their law school. But when you're being interviewed as a lateral, the law firm doesn't have those things to go off of. They just have your practice area in the firm you're at. So that specialty is what they're hiring. They're not hiring as much based on your law school as they are your specialty. And you may have also strengthened your commitment to work hard, to do good work, and to become an expert. And that's very important. So you can always get into a better law firm as a practicing attorney based on the person you become by specializing in learning a new craft as opposed to your law school grade. So anybody that wants to move to a more prestigious law firm as an associate, you really need to do whatever you can to be in a specialty, because the better the law firm, the more they expect you to have a specialty, meaning you do only trademark law or trademark litigation, maybe. You do only residential real estate law and not 10 different types of real estate, because big law firms have clients that are paying a lot of money and they want to hire people that are experts in a given practice area. And that's very important. They want experts. And partners lateraling between law firms are concerned about a book of business. That's very important. So any partner can also transition. One of the reasons it's hard for senior attorneys to work in major law firms if they're in-house is because they always don't have a book of business or clients. But when you have clients as a solo practitioner or as anything, like a partner level attorney, you're always going to have a good opportunity of getting hired. And you can always move to a more prestigious firm as a partner to spend, if you have a book of business and clients willing to pay the rates that a big law firm charges. So this is a good reason to move firms, is to move to a more prestigious one. I can't really emphasize it enough. That is a very good reason. The next reason to move firms is if you're not compensated well. So some law firms will pay as little as they possibly can to attorneys, or as much as they can afford. That could be small law firms. I was talking to a personal injury firm in Los Angeles the other day, and they want to pay their attorneys $50,000 to $60,000 a year because they have all these methods and they don't need a lot of skill, because sometimes auto accidents and stuff are basically about, was there a crash? And then what were the injuries? And then there's tables that people follow for the injuries. So they don't want to hire expensive people. I've also seen other firms pay people as little as $45,000 a year. And so these sorts of firms, if you're making significantly under market, wherever you are, you may want to move. It's important also to understand why the firm's not compensating you well. So if a law firm's not compensating you well, then you probably want to try to go someplace that is compensating you. Now, when I say not compensating you well, I'm not talking about a few $1,000s. I'm not talking about $10,000. I'm talking about larger numbers that are relevant to you searching. So sometimes the law firm may just not have the money to pay you well. And if they can't afford to pay you well, this means typically that they don't have a lot of work. They're not bringing enough business. There's something wrong with their business models, or they're doing something wrong in the market. So some businesses aren't offering what people want. And so they're not marketing themselves correctly, or people don't respect the partners in the firm. So that means basically that the law firm is not doing what it's supposed to. And if the law firm's not doing what it's supposed to attract business, then that's a problem. It could be in a small market where there's no clients. It could be in a practice area where there's no clients. It could be trying to sell something that companies in that market don't want. Imagine having a tax law firm in a town of 10,000 people where the closest town is an hour away with 25,000 people. That's not smart. Law firms should be feeding a hungry market. They should have plenty of people lining up for their work. The firm may also not have a good enough reputation. They may have a bad reputation, or more likely, they're just serving the wrong client. The client can't pay high rates, or the law firm does whatever work, that's it. And if you can, you should be, and the idea is you're just, regardless of why they're not paying you enough, you're just working for a group without the market power and strength to pay you well. Also, the law firm may not work well in the market, and you're being penalized for that. So that just means that the law firm just has problems with market fit. So the people may be nice, the environment may be collegial, but the absence of money is typically something that won't change. In fact, the absence of money is a sign that you may lose your job at some point. And you have to look at what happens to people there. So I talk to people all the time, and they're like, people come to our firm, they learn a trade, and then because they can make more money at another firm, they leave. And I was talking to someone the other day, they were at a firm in Washington, D.C. that was paying, I don't know, $80,000 a year, but was training people in international trade, which is a kind of a good niche practice area. And everybody was leaving after 2 years. And he said, somebody just went to, I don't know, a big firm that would pay someone like that $200,000 plus a year. Sometimes lower paid jobs mean you need to move. And that firm was doing a form of international trade for clients that couldn't pay as much or was a niche thing. Regardless of how nice the people may be or all that stuff, it just doesn't make sense to stay there. And if a law firm has the money to pay you well, like they are doing well, then that just means they're doing something else with it. Sometimes law firms are operated by one person. That one person that's operating the firm may not have the ability they may want to keep all the money. That's just what happens. Sometimes the firms, I talked to one woman not too long ago where the firm had this ridiculously expensive office in Los Angeles, but was doing low budget patent prosecution. So all the money went to pay for this office. Sometimes there's a partner or two in charge that are just taking all the money that comes in, never will pay you a lot. That's what they believe. Or sometimes they're paying retired partners a lot of money that may have started the firm, or just the partner that started the firm a lot of money that's not even working. So again, firms that don't pay you a lot of money, when other firms doing the same work in your market or other markets do, you should move firms if it's too low. And that's just how it is. You need to get out of there. And partners will often have this issue because the law firm will take the income of the most productive partners and redistribute it to non-productive partners oftentimes, and open new offices and all sorts of things. So sometimes your law firm may have opened a new office, and the office, everybody leaves and they have the office expense, or who knows, or they can't hire people in the market. So in these sorts of situations, it definitely makes sense to move. And many partners will move several times over their careers because they go to firms where they aren't getting paid enough, where people are taking too much of their income that they could generate at other firms, and that's helping them. And in these situations, it makes sense for partners to move. And many partners will move several times in their careers because of this. Other times, law firms are having financial problems. You don't know why that is, but you should work in firms that are on the way up and not the way down. The biggest way to get ahead is to hitch yourself to a ladder going up and not a ladder going down. Law firms that are going down are often very old law firms sometimes, or they may be firms where partners are leaving. They may be firms where they're losing business, but that's scary. What's the point of that? You want to be in law firms that are moving up. The best law firms to work in, by the way, I'll just tell you right off the bat, are new law firms with partners that are experienced in running law firms or working in very sophisticated law firms that come out of very good law firms with a lot of business or good law firms with a lot of business, and they keep growing. They're like 10 attorneys one year, 15 the next. Just imagine when I joined Quinn Emanuel at 45 attorneys, and now it's over 1,000. That's a good opportunity. The other time you may be compensated poorly is a law firm doesn't value you. They're not going to give you raises because they're not that excited about you, or they may just believe they can always hire other attorneys in the market and find someone else. They can hire recruiters. That's just what big law is. If someone leaves, no problem. They hire a recruiter. Someone is in whatever. They will, if you're fungible and they believe that they can put an ad out and get someone like you that will bill more hours and is just as enthusiastic, they can get rid of you and hire someone else. So if you sense this, you should go to a firm that values you. I've worked with countless law firms that didn't value, countless attorneys where they were at law firms that didn't value them. So they moved firms and they had massive success at their new firms. And so money, when a law firm's paying you a lot of money, it means that they have a lot of work, they need you, and they're paying you that money to hold on to you. This is what the biggest law firms do. And small law firms do this as well. You just never know. So that's a great reason just to make more money. If you feel that there's reasons that you're not being paid more money. This is one of the most important reasons that people should move firms. The other one is to be close to your significant other. It could be your long-term boyfriend or girlfriend. It could be someone you're going to marry or someone you're married to. And if you believe that relationship is likely to last, then hell yeah, you should try to move there or have them move to you. But if that's not in the cards, then you want to try to move there with that person because law firms like that. One of the things that law firms like is they like anything that shows any form of permanence for people, whether they're moving to a larger market or a smaller market. They like it when you settle down. Law firms love it when people buy homes in the market that they're in because that shows they're going to stay. They can give you more work. You're likely to be someone that's stable with their clients. You're likely, in many cases, if you get married, to have a family. The family will make you much more cautious about recklessly moving firms. It will make you work harder because you have people to support. It will make you more permanent. It will make it more likely that you're not going to leave the practice of law or go take an in-house job or go into the government or something along those lines because your family is going to depend on you for homes, for car payments, for spending money, for all those things. So the law firm depends on you. And if the law firm depends on you, that's hugely important. So you always want the law firms to depend on you. You want the law firm to believe you're dependent on them, because if they believe you're dependent on them, they're more likely to make you partner. They're more likely to do all those things. So being close to a significant other means you're likely to stay in that market. You're likely to stay in that job. You're likely not to move around. And if people do this, it's one of the most important and best reasons for moving firms, because when you do that, the law firm will know that you're likely to stay. And you'll actually be more likely to get jobs when you move to those areas. Again, extremely important reason is if your significant other is there. But the other thing that you need to ask, and this is very important, is you need to ask whose career is more important. So I've seen people move markets when their significant other might have a sales job for a company or something and doesn't pay it. So you need to understand who's more important. And I hate to say it, but if you have mentors, if you're doing well, if you're advancing, if your compensation's good, then you have what's called political capital or law firm capital, meaning if you move, you're going to lose that. And again, this is a reason for not moving, is having this political capital. So law firms prefer that their careers of their attorneys are prioritized in the romantic relationships, not the other way around. So you have to be very careful with that. And even though it's a good reason, you have to make sure that you have a good reason. So what would a good reason be? my wife's family lives in this market. We're planning on having kids, and we need someone to help out. My wife's don't have as much of a family, all these sorts of things. So you need to market in that way. Again, these are hugely important. If you're able to do this, you will get profoundly more jobs than others. But you have to say, who would you prioritize? Would you want someone whose career took second place in a relationship, or someone whose career took first place? So I've seen a lot of examples of good attorneys that didn't get hired. So I was working with a woman not too long ago that would move to San Diego and had been married for, I don't know, 15 years or something, or a long time, 10 years, and then had moved to San Diego as a first or second year associate. But she had moved something like 6 times with her husband over this 10-year period that they had been together, because he just kept getting transferred to other naval bases or something. So she'd been all over the world, but in Maryland and San Diego and all these, San Francisco and all these different places. Obviously, that's a risky hire, and I helped her not talk about that on her resume and so forth, but that's risky. So law firms, because the law firm is going to believe you're just going to move, so you may be working there. But again, law firms want you to have obligations hanging over your head. The more obligations, the better, because you're going to need to stay there. And I'm saying, if you buy a really expensive car or you move into an expensive house, that's an obligation. If you have student loans, that's an obligation. Law firms want you to have obligations because it means you'll stick around. They can introduce you to clients. You're welcome to work harder. When people are moving harder or closer to be a significant other, this is going to suggest that they're likely to settle down in that market and to be stable. And if they're moving to be closer to a significant other, that's something they should do, all things considered. It's going to benefit their career if they make it as they want to settle down, buy a house, and so forth. It's important to also mention that sometimes this doesn't work out. I recently spoke to an attorney that was working in a small law firm in South Carolina. She'd been there for a few years and wanted to relocate to a larger firm in Chicago to join a significant other. She was having a very difficult time because in different parts of South Carolina, people don't move out of certain smaller markets. It becomes very insular. There's kind of the South versus the North mentality running, not spoken of, but sometimes it's there. And there were cliques in this firm that had been going since high school. She moved there, but what happens is she moved there for her ex-fiance that she had been engaged to. And because it was a smaller firm, she'd been spending all of her time doing very generalist skills. And because she wanted to move to a large firms want people to do very niche type skills. So what is the niche type skill? It means you do corporate law, or you don't do corporate law and litigation, or you do patent prosecution. You don't do trademark law and IP litigation and, I don't know, licensing. You have something that's, and this is what big firms want. And so if you move someplace to be close to a significant other, you need to be confident you'll stay there in the long term. I wandered around this website the other day, and it was filled with hundreds of wedding rings from Tiffany's and all these great places. And each one of them said, worn 2 weeks, worn 3 months, meaning they were saying how long they were worn because people had broken up engagements. So that's just something to think about, that a lot of engagements, and I was in an engagement once it ended. And so you need to be aware of that. The other reason to move is to be closer to a family member or go home to where you grew up. This, among all the reasons, is the one that's going to make you, in my opinion, the most likely to get hired. This is better than moving to a spouse. This is better than moving up. It's just an awesome reason, because if you move to one of those firms, you can really locate to, it's very common sense. Law firms believe that if you relocate to that market, you will stay. And I've seen attorneys get tons of interviews when they do that. It could be someone that's relocating to Detroit, for example. I had a conversation with a law firm not too long ago, and this is when the market was a little bit better. And they said, we're looking for a securities attorney, but we want the person to be from Detroit. So they basically said, we're looking all over the country, but we want whoever we hire to be from Detroit. They wanted the person to be from Detroit because if they were from Detroit, then the firm then they'd be likely to stay. A lot of people will go to Detroit and they'd leave the second they get a chance. But if they're from Detroit, likely to stay. Now, I like Detroit. I'm just saying if you move there from Miami, you're probably not going to want to stay unless you're from there. Same thing from Los Angeles. People do relocate, but not always. Law firms like it when you're being closer to a family member. This is really the best way to get a job when you're relocating. The reason this is such a good reason is because you don't need to apply. And this is something everyone needs to remember. This is very important if you're from another market. You do not need to just apply to openings in that market. You go on Law Crossing, you go on other websites, Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, and you look at jobs. You don't need to just apply to jobs. You should apply to every firm in your practice area that you can see yourself working at. It's common sense, because when you're relocating, you're basically saying you get one bite at the apple, you get to interview me right now. And I get most of my interviews, a lot of times that I get are with firms, a significant portion, like 80%, 90%, are with firms that do not have openings and where the attorney is just applying to all the firms that match them. Now, that rule, by the way, doesn't apply for major markets. It doesn't apply to Los Angeles. It doesn't apply to New York. It doesn't apply to Miami. It doesn't apply, but it applies to most markets that are non-major cities. So it would apply to Columbus. It would apply to Cincinnati. It would apply to Wisconsin. It would apply to maybe even Minneapolis, but markets that people just generally don't go to, Syracuse, New York, markets of people that where there's not a lot of, where there's just tons of lateral candidates. So that works. Another point I want to make to everyone that's very important. So if you're a BCG candidate, or if you're applying to jobs on your own or whatever, it's very important to apply to jobs right when they come out. Because what happens is after the job has been active for a week or so, the law firm will get overwhelmed with applications, and typically they'll start scheduling applications because they need someone from the resumes that come in the first couple of days. You need to do what you can to apply to positions just right away when they come in. You can't delay, because this is one of the things that happens with a lot of our candidates at BCG. So what happens is they come in and they sign up, and we send them all the matching jobs immediately, and they apply. But those matching jobs may have been open. They may get a couple that are a few days old, but most of them are going to be jobs where the firm may have started interviewing. They're down the track interviewing, and so they're, even if a really good candidate comes along, they may not even look at them or consider them because they have so many resumes. So it usually takes a while when you're looking at job boards and you're looking at old jobs, or you're looking at old jobs that a recruiter has that aren't filled yet, but the firm may be down. So a firm's not going to say close our job until they've hired someone and the person shows up to work, but that process could take a couple months. So if you're discouraged early in your job search, the only reason is because the firm may have started interviewing. They're not really looking at extra candidates. They may be, they may not be, but they're more likely not to be. And so you'll have a better chance if you're just applying to jobs right away. You should be looking at jobs that you get from us or from any website. You should be applying immediately. I hope you write this down and understand it. It's very, very important. Firms put candidates with partners with portable business, can move at any time back to their home market if they can bring their clients. But if attorneys relocating home to their family, they know that's the last move. And there's not a lot of suspicion, by the way, with attorneys relocating. So if you're relocating in your own market, the law firm is thinking to themselves, first of all, they're thinking, we work with this firm, we may not want to be in this practice area, maybe we don't want to hire people from this firm, which happens sometimes. They may also be thinking, this attorney is having problems with their existing firm. They may want to move for that reason. So they will think that they'll be very suspicious. They'll think, is this person leaving? Why aren't they getting along? What's the problem? Are they not getting work? Is the firm pushing them out? These are the questions firms are asking when they're hiring you locally. And those questions are even more pronounced when there's a lot of applicants they're getting. So this is something to remember. You will get more interviews with firms when you're relocating home. You will also have the option, if you're not in a major market, to apply to every firm there. So these are good reasons to do that. And if you're relocating home, you can get more interviews and convert a higher percentage of these interviews into offers. I was working with a girl recently that was an Olympic athlete relocating to Seattle from, I don't know, Cleveland or something. I don't know how she got to Cleveland, but she was relocating home and she was just a litigator. And she must have gotten like 15 interviews at firms that didn't have openings. Some of them that were firms that we didn't ever get a lot of interviews at. So when you're relocating home, and the Olympic athlete made her interesting, and so the firms liked her because of that. But when you're relocating home, you're going to make a lot more placements. Relocating home shows a commitment. You're going to stay. And it also raises very few questions, because why would you be suspicious of someone that wants to move to be closer to their mother or their family? So it's very common, by the way, if you're an attorney in a major market, like New York City, the Bay Area, Boston, or other markets, to work there for several years before you relocate to your home market. It just happens all the time. And typically, all the training that you receive, the big city work ethic, and the other skills that you get in a large market will also be valued in the attorney's home market. You need to stay on top of that. And that's very important. You just want to make sure that you're on top of that and you're getting, you're working with firms that, that you're able to apply to. Because what happens is typically, so say you're in a really big market and you want to relocate to, I don't know, Traverse City, Michigan. I'm just giving Michigan because I'm from there. But Traverse City is not a big market, but there's some good firms there. But the firms that you would do in New York or work in New York or Cisco, or typically if it's a big city, are going to be far more sophisticated. And these firms are going to be fired up to interview you if you apply to them, because they're going to get someone with more skills that's going to stay. Whereas if you relocated, like I told you earlier in one of the first slides, if you're trying to relocate to a firm and say that you're from if you're in San Francisco and you want to relocate to another firm, or if you're in Traverse City and want to work in another firm, those firms are going to be suspicious of you. They're going to think, what's going on and what's wrong with this person? But we'll have to ask questions. They'll figure out, are you working enough? Are you doing good work? And so this is how that works. So you need to really concentrate on this stuff and do what you can to make sure that you're applying to the right firms. The other thing is firms will, if you're moving to a smaller market, you're going to be doing oftentimes less sophisticated work, whereas you're not going to look like you're moving down as you would in a larger market. They're just interested in you. So it's very important. The other reason, as I told you earlier, to move to a larger firm is to get exposed to more sophisticated work. And I already talked about this in detail, so I'm not going to give a lot of information. I'm going to try to move through these slides a little bit faster. But the idea is that if you've done work at a very sophisticated firm, especially in markets, things like corporate and transactional practice areas, there's going to be profound differences in terms of the sophistication of your work. If you're doing a merger in a small firm, it may be a $10 to $20 million merger, whereas if you're doing a merger in a larger firm, there could be billions of dollars at issue. And when there's billions of dollars at issue, you're going to be trained in a much different manner than you would be at a small corporate firm. Small litigation matters between people fighting about little things are going to be far different than class actions. Large real estate deals involve different skills than small real estate deals. And there's a lot of advantages to working and getting exposed to more sophisticated work. You will actually become a better attorney because you'll look at things from a perspective that you normally wouldn't. So what does that mean? So imagine you went to high school and you took chemistry, right? You know something about chemistry. You know how to do high school chemistry, or maybe you took AP chemistry. But then imagine you go to Caltech or you go to any school and you major in chemistry. The depth you're going to go in is going to be far different than the depth of the way you're going to see things if you major than if you didn't go to college. I'll tell you another interesting story that I thought was absolutely fascinating. When I went to University of Chicago, we took these placement tests to get into different calculus classes. So there was easy calculus, there was, intermediate or honors calculus, and then there was like super honors calculus. So people were placed into these groups depending on how well they did those tests. So I don't know what happened to me, because I certainly didn't get an 800 on my math SATs, but I somehow was placed in the super honors calculus. I got there and I realized very quickly that I did not belong, because not only was the textbook was like 100 pages, and you were just expected to follow along without a lot of examples because you were so smart. So I just realized I didn't belong there. Then I got into this intermediate hard calculus, which I started taking. And that was like maybe for people that took that were maybe like instead of the top 5% of the class for maybe the top 15. And I got in there and everything was good for a week or two. But then I realized it was absolutely impossible for me. And if I continued taking this course, I was not going to do very well at all. And so I needed to do whatever I could to move down. So I moved to the intermediate calculus and I did great. I think I got good grades for that school. But what happened, and I just want everyone to understand, what happened to the people that took the intermediate calculus is they ended up getting these incredible scores on standardized tests when they were applying to graduate school and law school, and just got, all of them almost got incredible grades, like at the school, like were the top people. And I was able to get incredible grades, but I took classes that I knew I would do well. And these people took really hard classes. So what I'm saying is that I think that taking that class made people smarter. Or made them look at things in much more depth, because these calculus problems were, I thought, impossible, some of them. And I couldn't understand the basics. So I think people look at a lot, depending on the sophistication of what you're exposed to, you're going to think better. You're going to be better. A chemist that gets a PhD in chemistry from a big school is going to be much better and look at things in much more depth than someone that only works on or takes high school calculus. Or high school chemistry. So this is the issue. When you work on sophisticated clients, you're able to see problems in much more depth. You're able to take your whole legal career and really take it to the moon, because you're seeing matters and things in a way that other attorneys aren't. And in litigation, it's very common for a small law firm to go against maybe filing plaintiff's work, a plaintiff's breach of contract or something, to go against a large firm. And they almost always get crushed because they can see all these things. They see the rules of civil procedure and arguments they can make with that. They see case law that doesn't look like they see things that doesn't look like it's relevant, but actually is. And so they just see things. And you learn much better, and you are exposed to much more sophisticated work, and you are educated more in the practice of law when you're going into better firms that do more sophisticated work, because you're become a different attorney. Personal injury law for auto accidents is a much different type of attorney than someone that's suing, say, an automaker for a product liability case where there's billions of dollars at issue. So you can approach problems in a much more sophisticated way, the better firm you're at, because they have larger clients that are willing to pay more money and do better. So just going to a good law school puts you on the 95th yard line, and the best law school, because you can step out and do that sophisticated work right away. But to learn to be an exceptional attorney and to learn all this stuff, it's not enough 1 year. You really, if I were you, I would stay there 5 years, because it takes about 5 years to really learn any practice area and become really good at it. Meaning, you know the arguments to make, or you know the things to watch out for a transaction. And that, therefore, going to a larger firm than you're at can make you much better than those that are trained to do less sophisticated work. Those skills have a higher value in the market. You will do better as a solo practitioner. You will do better at a small firm. You will do better wherever you are when you understand that. The other thing I keep stressing, and this is all incredibly important information for your career. Just this webinar alone can change the direction of your career 100% if you understand what I'm saying and you really listening. But you have to have a specialty. When you have a specialty, that means you're majoring in something like you would in college. That means you're getting a graduate degree like you would in college. So having a specialty, not having a specialty is like going to college and you take a math class, you take some history class, maybe a couple history, you take English, maybe take a chemistry class, and maybe you also take physics or something. You're just a generalist. You don't have any experience. But when you major in one thing and you study it and you concentrate on it, you can see things in more depth and you're better. So clients, just as graduate schools and everyone, will typically charge more money, or will pay more for specialists, just as you would pay more for someone that can do a rare type of brain surgery than you would pay for just a regular surgeon to operate on you. So the rarer your skill set, the more you can charge for your legal work, the more law firms will pay you, and the more likely you're to get hired. So this is important. The only people that I generally represent is a legal recruiter. And if I look at 100 resumes, typically very few, like lower than 20%, maybe even lower than that, have resumes that are focused on one practice area. They just do a bunch of different things. No one's going to pay for that. Would you? Would you pay for a doctor that does 15 different things? Would you want your criminal defense lawyer that is where you're accused of murder and where you just didn't do it to be a generalist attorney that does corporate law and trademarks? And no, you wouldn't want that. So law firms and the market value people that are specialized. And the work is often much more challenging and interesting because specialized work means you're not glossing over problems. You're not just thinking, I got to get this thing out the door. At the lowest level, this is a funny story. I was working when I was practicing law with this attorney named John Van de Kamp that was the former Attorney General of California. He was retired and he was at Dewey Ballantine just for kind of optics, but he had a couple clients and one of them was an insurance company in Massachusetts. And every time someone drove out from Massachusetts, a local insurance company, to California and got in an accident, he would defend them. So I went up against this insurance defense firm that I couldn't believe. They would do a motion or something, and nothing would be formatted correctly. You'd have one sentence here, a sentence would break off and start the gap later. It was unbelievable. And then they forgot to file this paper we went to an arbitration. You have to, if you don't like the result of the arbitration in California, if it's a mandatory arbitration, you have to file a motion to dismiss the result of the arbitration within 10 days. There were like 3 insurance defense firms there. They didn't file it. So I just filed a motion to confirm the arbitration because it was dismissed. And I was going to go to court on it. And one of them filed something that said, I was in charge of filing the motion to vacate it. I asked my secretary to write it for me and file it, and she didn't. And then they attached a verification, or what is it called? I forget what it's called, but I don't know why I'm forgetting it. But they attached a document. Why am I forgetting this? Anyway, they attached a document from the secretary saying I was directed to do this and I always do this, which of course is unauthorized practice of law, which is astonishing. And they filed that meaning she was told to forge a signature, she was told to prepare a motion, basically practice law, and she didn't. And this is what they filed. So a lot of times law firms will not be good. They will not give you a lot of training. They won't go over issues with them. What they expect is different levels of the firm. If you were to do something like that in a large firm, you would be fired instantly, and it just wouldn't work. But the best attorneys dive deeply into problems, and they don't do a lot of rote work. Now, you can do rote work when you're a junior associate in the firm doing document review or responding to discovery, but the more in depth you go in matters, the better. The other one is training, which is very important. I knew an attorney that he was offered a position at an AmLaw 50 law firm after the summer associate. After the middle of a recession that was very hard, the firm sent him a letter saying, hey, you can start in 1 year, but we're not going to pay you anything, and you can do what you want during that year because we're in a recession. Or you can take this check, which is probably the equivalent of $5,000 now. And when you take this check, we're not going to agree to hire you, and our obligations to you are done. So he took the check. The only job he was able to get was at an insurance defense firm. And his first day, he was handed 100 cases and told to do whatever he needed and not trained. So that's not good. You need to be trained, and you need that when you're at a good firm, you're trained by the partners you work for, the associates you work for. You learn how to be a better attorney, and you do not develop habits that are going to hurt you in the long run. So this critiques that you receive in the best firms are often painful. Like I remember in my firm, when I went to Dewey Ballantine, there was a partner that was from a big firm. I think it was Dewey Ballantine, or not Dewey Ballantine. He was from a partner at Latham. And he would, with the junior associates, he would go in and he would just take apart their work like in an hour and say, if you don't fix this, this is not good. And he would really make people operate at a much higher level than they otherwise would if they were not working at a major law firm. So if you have someone hanging over your head, critiquing your work, it's a huge benefit. It can help you grow. If you don't feel like you're getting any training and guidance, you're often best looking for a new position. So what do I mean by someone hanging over your head and really giving you a hard time? What that means, coffee packet. What that means is that your work is being ripped up when you're new. You're being told about whatever is not right. You're missing things. This is how you should look at it at a deeper level. This is not acceptable. This case doesn't really stand for this, or you miss this thing in the transaction. You're being made to feel like a complete, absolute idiot with the work. Now, this happens to the best attorneys. It doesn't matter where you went to law school. This is the process. And if you're not getting it, by the way, when you're early in your career and people aren't marking up your work, then there's something wrong. So I'm just telling you, this is what happens to all attorneys at all law firms if the firm is good enough. So typically your reviews in law firms will be very harsh. Your first year, they'll be less harsh your second year and less harsh your third year. And by your third year, if you've managed to learn from all that, and you're still there, the law firm will tell you how awesome you are because they want to keep you around because you're going to be profitable between your third and 6th to 8th year. And then the law firm will start evaluating you based on business and partnership material and other things. But your first or third year, you should be having your work destroyed. And this is when a lot of attorneys leave, by the way. Like, they can't handle it. Certain firms will give harder critiques than others. And but the best attorneys will definitely tell you everything you're doing wrong. And if you're not getting that as a six-month attorney or 1-year attorney, then that means you're not being forced to grow. So I just want everyone to understand that harsh reviews, beyond telling you have to look for a job, are not something you should worry too much about. They may say, but you're still green, or they may say, this is not saying anything's written in stone, but they will tell you many times to look for a position if they think that. But if you're just getting bad reviews, that's not necessarily something to worry too much about. If you're a good attorney and there's a recession, they may say, we understand the work's slow, but we really like you and hope you stick around or something, in addition to the harsh review. The other thing that happens is your physical health may make you leave. So I only bring this up because I've encountered lots of attorneys, and for some reason, a lot of them in New York, that with these hours and things, they start having health issues. I've encountered attorneys at big firms in Los Angeles that start having health issues. Sometimes they have immune disorders. I've seen that a lot. I don't know why it is, but these incredible hours can affect you. I don't know what it is with immune disorders, or maybe that's a psychosomatics for some people. I don't know, but I can think of several women that when I wrote this over the past year, I think 5, that left firms due to immune disorders. And I don't know what it is, but maybe it's being in office buildings, recycle there, and not getting out enough. I don't know, but it's something that I'd like to look into. Other attorneys get heart problems. They're sitting at a desk all day. They're stressed. They're not exercising. They're eating sandwiches and they're not taking care of themselves. They have heart problems or heart attacks. I knew people that died in their 30s and 40s to 30s to 40s from heart attacks from practicing law. Think about this. Like, you're under stress all the time. You're working all these hours. You're not exercising. You're not taking care of yourself. You're eating unhealthy food, and you die or you have a heart attack. I've seen instances, I know of 2 of them, interesting, but of attorneys, one of them that flew home and had a heart attack when he got home, and another that took a trip, and when he got to where he was going on the airplane on a Thursday or something, and didn't have to work until Monday, had a heart attack and died. So why is that? I think it's because maybe you're on high levels of adrenaline or something. I don't know, when you're working, and then when your body has a chance to relax, it just conks out. So a lot of attorneys are so motivated to fight and try so hard that they're being a law firm may not be the best place for your health. I've heard stories about attorneys going to firms that are where they're having a hard time, and they start doing cocaine and crystal meth, or drinking too much and taking pills and seeing psychiatrists, and because they're just trying to fight as hard as they can, but it's not for them. and they don't like it. And it's just they're not motivated by it, and they have to use outside substances to reduce their stress level or keep going. And the thing about a law firm, and I hate to say this, but the law firm has no incentive if you're building a lot of hours to tell you to take it easy for your health. They can, some people will say it, associates, but they don't. If you're billing hours and you're making the money, then they're the partners like that. So it's not to say that they're evil, but it's saying the economic forces inside of a law firm will keep you doing that as long as they can. The other one is mental health. So everyone has different types of mental health. So you may have had, it's very common for attorneys or for law students to be taking antidepressants or get subscriptions for Xanax and again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being depressed or taking pills and things. But if you have mental health, and a lot of it starts in law school, because that's when the stress of competing is just put at a much higher level where you're not the best student anymore and you don't know what's going on, you're sad or depressed or freaked out. And so I know of a lot of people that have experienced mental health issues. I hear it all the time. I hear people telling me that they want to kill themselves. This is the kind of conversations that I've had with attorneys in law firms and that are stressed out. This is that they can't leave because they don't want to look bad to their family. They don't want to look bad to people they went to law school with, and they're unable to take it. And frankly, the working conditions inside of law firms are just not natural. They're too much for many attorneys. And the problem with a law firm is it won't end. The politics change. You could be one time on the right side of politics, and then you could be on the wrong side of politics, and that ends up affecting you negatively. So I always recommend that law firms, that candidates do whatever they can to be on the right side of issues. It's not on the right side, but don't participate in politics, because if you do, everybody gets burned eventually. Someone in a group in power that wasn't in power will come in power, they'll get rid, you just know, and then they'll get rid of you won't get work from people that are on the one side of an issue. These politics can create all sorts of issues. People in law firms will rely on alcohol, antidepressants, marijuana, cocaine, crystal meth, Adderall, statin, any other substance to help them push through. And if this is what's happening to you and your substance abuse problems aren't pre-existing, meaning you didn't have them when you were in college or law school or at college and they've developed, then that's probably a problem. And there's something maybe off about that. Now, maybe you have attention deficit disorder and need Adderall or something, but if you have all these mental issues and they're starting and you're not, and you're in crisis, then, or finding yourself drinking every night, finding yourself smoking pot every night, finding yourself needing to rely on this stuff, then that's a sign from your mind that this is a problem. And you're not going to have time to go to AA or NA meetings anyway, because you're working all the time. So you're just going down this dangerous path. You don't want to go crazy. I've seen so many attorneys just completely lose it. And you don't have to be fit for this sort of stuff. So if someone tries to go and be a Navy SEAL, you may start out with a class of 100 people and 20 people don't make it. That's fine. They're just not built for it. They can't take it. They don't have, and that doesn't mean you have to be a bad thing. You just are competing at a level that's unhealthy. Let those people compete at that level. I've seen some people, and I'm not going to say what firms, but people that I know that worked in big firms when they started the practice of law and stayed in huge firms and have been working 2,500 hours per year for 15 plus years. And they look like sailors. Their skin's bad. Sometimes their teeth are crooked because they're actually, I shouldn't buy teeth, but their hair's a mess. They look pale. They gained a lot of weight. They just look like completely different people. And maybe they're counsel or something, but some people compete at that level. Partners at these big firms can deal with it most of the time. But these mental issues that you're developing don't have anything to do with you. These are caused by the law firm. And you just need to realize that. I've seen law firms where every single partner is divorced. Why? Because they're never home. And how does that make you feel when you're alone? You don't have anyone to support you, and you're going out on these dates, and you're not connecting because I don't know, or you're connecting with people that are willing to tolerate. It's just all these things mean you need to get into a different environment. And this is important. Just listening to this could save your life and save your sanity, because the environments we have everything to do with our state of mind, our confidence, how well we do in the world, how happy you are. My daughter just got out of a middle school. She was at a private middle school, and all the popular girls basically had eating disorders. They were competitive for how much they ate. They were very thin. They were negative and had problems. And it basically was the type of market thing that drives people down and not up. And she was feeling alone and excluded. And she went to a new school where she had gone to elementary school with kids from there. And suddenly she's got 20 friends. There was a fair the other day, and she went with all these kids. So people are happier depending on the environments they're in. There are environments that lift everyone up, where people are happier, where they're more productive, where they have better lives. And there are environments that tear people down. There are people that lift us up and people that tear us down. So you need to be in an environment where you feel built up. The environment, by the way, of a law firm where you're not connecting with partners, like they're not nice to you, they're just distant, where other associates are all fighting with each other, and where your work's under a microscope and you're terrified all the time and you feel like you're not billing enough hours, and this is not good for you. Please, this is not healthy. If you're in an environment where everyone's criticizing you, where you feel like on the outs and you're not part of like you're excluded from things, you're excluded from activities outside of work, you're not given good work and you're upset. These are things where you need to think very seriously about if this benefits you, because you can go in an environment that lifts you up. So here's a quick story, and I keep telling this year after year, webinar after webinar. I clerked for a federal judge in a city called Bay City, Michigan. And when I got there, there were a lot of new attorneys or young attorneys that were like 1 to 4 or 5 years from local law firms in Bay City and Midland, Flint, basically an area maybe 45 minutes around that vicinity. And those attorneys were all at the same firms when I was clerking. They came into the court, or I went out to new attorney socials for those areas and stuff. And I looked up those people not too long ago, like a few years ago, and almost every one of them was at the same firm that they were at when we're talking 20 plus years ago. Imagine that, like same firm. Now, if I were to do the same thing with everyone that was an associate at the 2 major firms I joined, I'd be lucky to find 1 or 2. Think about that. So the environment that you're in, now, I think these people were happier. They didn't have to work long hours. They were at good firms that were doing commercial litigation. But think about that. So the environment you're in is very important. It can make or break you. So you should try the best of your ability to surround yourself with happy people, healthy, because if you are those people like that, you're going to be the same. If you walk into a firm and that you get a sense that it's not positive, that it's negative, and you sense that vibe, which you will, regardless of the salary, that's not going to change. And if you get that sense. This other reason is a very good reason to leave, not having enough work. And not having enough work is a very important one as well. What does that mean? It means that if you don't have a lot of work and it's consistent, it's consistent and it's continuing to go on, and other associates don't have work, then you're a problem. I was having a meeting yesterday with my assistant that works for me, and he was saying, oh, it's great, you're always creating all these projects and work, and because a lot of people don't, and that's true. The best attorneys and the best firms are able to create work. They take a look at a matter and they say, we can do this, we can do this, they can do this, and they upsell the clients, or they find new clients that need work. The ability of a law firm, and you, by the way, to create work is going to determine if you get clients. It's going to determine the amount of work, amount of hours you bill. It's going to determine all those things. And work is a lifeblood of any law firm. Law firms need to be creating work constantly. If they're not creating work, they have the wrong people in power and the wrong partners there, and there's a problem. They need to be, now certain practice areas, again, like corporate securities in a recession or other things are not positive, but even those attorneys can help create work for the firm in different practice areas. If they're not creating work, there's a problem with the firm, and it's pretty good odds you're going to have trouble in the future. And you should not stick around too long in a firm where there's not a lot of work. Now, there's nothing wrong with a couple of weeks going by or a month or two, but really, if it looks like it's going to be there for a while and you can sense it, you need to start looking for a job, because law firms, they have no reason to keep you around. You're a fixed cost that if you're not billing enough hours, they're going to get rid of you. Sometimes you don't have enough work. If they're not giving you work and other people have work, they're going to get rid of you. You just need to face those facts. There's very little you can do if you've made a few mistakes or they don't like you or whatever. You can try to fix it, but law firms need to be serious about profits per partner, especially large law firms. Large law firm partners, by the way, compare firms based on the profits per partner. That's how they move. They move to firms where they believe that they can make more money. So a law firm, especially large law firms, are comparing their firms about that. But the big thing is, if there's not enough work at a firm, in order for that law firm to make more money for its partners, it needs to cut costs. It needs to keep the attorneys around that are billing the most hours and get rid of the ones that aren't. Sometimes partners hoard work and they don't give it to other partners or associates. This means they don't have a lot of work. Sometimes what happens is you become a senior associate. When you become a senior associate, your billing rate is very similar to the client, to the partners. So the partners often won't want to give you work because the client wants them to do the work, not an associate. And not only that, but the client, the partners typically make more money when they do their own work. So if they do the work on their own clients, they might get 40% of what they bill and collect. If they give it to others, they might get 10 or 15. So if they're not giving you work, then there's not enough work as a senior associate. It's time for you to look for a job. And this is what happens, by the way. This is very important for you to understand. When you become a senior associate and the law firm stops having the incentive to give you work. So unless you're an expert, meaning your work is so good that partners want to give you work and not do it themselves, or your work, you are able to find work so effectively that you don't have to worry about your hours. This is how, by the way, when they make someone a partner in a big law firm with no business, they're just like, wow, this person was able to get 2,800 hours of work compared to the next person that was able to get 2,400 hours of work. I literally had a law firm I was working at. When I told them I was worried because my friend didn't make partner, when I quit, they came in and said that. They said, so-and-so only worked 2,400 hours that didn't make partner, and the person that did worked 2,800 hours. So this is how they evaluate you. They evaluate you on your ability to get work. If you're getting work and billing a lot of hours, that means you're satisfying the clients who are the partners. That's it. And or you're not getting work from the clients you have working on for the clients. So if work is slow, you can't get work, you need to start looking for a new job. That's it. You need to be where there's work to do. If there's no work to do, what is your opportunity? Do you have opportunities to make partner? Do you have opportunities to improve your skills? Do you have opportunities for raises? Are you secure in your job? None of that. So again, law firms giving others work and not you in your practice area is very serious, and you need to fix that. When I was an associate at this Dewey Valentine firm, they had a way where you could enter in someone's name into a search, and so you would log into this thing, and then you would search for your name, and you would see the amount of hours there, the amount of hours you built. You could do that with anybody's name, not partners, but other associates. So there was an associate in my firm that went crazy, by the way, or he seemed crazy, that hadn't had any work in a year because he'd been iced out. He always had his door closed in his office, but partners didn't like him and they basically excluded him. What was not funny, but what happened is I ran into him in the hall one day. I knew he hadn't had any work, and he was a really smart guy. He'd gone to Columbia Law School and was like first in his class at big college. I think it was BYU or something, and really smart. And I ran into him in the hall, and I said, what are you up to? And he said, I'm working like crazy. I'm working on this motion, and it's due today. I got to go. And I've been up all night, all week for the past week. He literally hadn't been. I don't know if he went to BYU. Actually, I think he went to, doesn't matter. But anyway, that's basically what happened. He went negative. If you're not getting work, other people are. The message is clear. You need to start looking around. This is just another one I want to be clear with. A lot of people take jobs at law firms where they have titles like managing associate, and they're not, or they may be contract attorneys or staff attorneys. People move from firms that aren't as prestigious to better big firms as staff attorneys. Most law firms, a lot of law firms are doing this. They're doing it even with people from good schools, and people are taking these jobs. If you're a staff attorney, in most cases, you're never going to be a regular associate at those firms. If you do become a regular associate, in most cases, you're going to be at a disadvantage because you started as a staff attorney. Now, is that always? Of course not. But that's one of the things that happens. And a lot of attorneys will apply for associate positions, and then at the end of the process, will get a staff attorney job. What kind of attorneys does it happen with? Sometimes it happens with attorneys that quit their jobs very early in their career, might have gone in-house. I've seen that a couple of times recently. And then the law firm's nervous about them staying, so they make them staff attorneys. I've seen this with people in practice areas where there's inconsistent work, which could be like trademark prosecution, and where the work may not be as difficult, where the person might just be filing a simple trademark. So it happens a lot of times. But if you're offered a staff attorney, it's not a good thing all the time. And I'm not being, a lot of times, I'm not even going to say this, but they're often extended to people that may not, that. And so I'm just saying a lot of the people that are extended these jobs, maybe it's because they're unemployed. Maybe it's because they didn't have summer associate jobs. Maybe it's because they're stay-at-home moms. I don't know, or they need time off. But it does seem at a lot of firms, not every firm, of course, and there are a lot of people that are offering these positions were often of people that were different groups and not necessarily that. There's reasons people might have switched jobs too much. They may have gone, I don't know, but there's names for these that it's in the law firm, you're staff attorney, you're not given the most important work. Typically, you're given that role, you may be paid okay, but you're not expected to work a lot of hours. So they make that trade-off, but they don't think highly enough of you. They let you go first. If there's a slowdown, you're always the first one to go first. Can they put their associate on that role? They don't give you the best work. You're probably not invited on law firm retreats. Those are only for partners and associate. They don't advance you based on your class year each year, your compensation, and they typically do not think as highly of you as an associate. Why would you want, I don't know, because you should be at a firm that's compensating you and treating you like you're a member of the group and where you have advancement potential. If you stay at one of these jobs and don't go to a firm where you have advancement potential, this is all you'll ever be. And is that worth it? It is worth it, by the way. If you are so gung-ho and serious about having a stable job, a job where you don't have to work a lot of hours, that's fine. But this may be honest, by the way, of hiring someone and then making the person work all like crazy for 12 years and then letting them go. But if you're motivated by any stretch of the imagination to get ahead, to be treated, given the important work, you shouldn't be doing that. Why is that? It's like me. It would be like going to college and not getting into, I don't know, being auditing classes. I don't know what the word for that is, but you're never going to be in a position where you can get ahead. And that's scary. I had a candidate not too long ago. He went to University of Virginia Law School. He went in-house after 1 year at a big firm, huge firm, Covington and Burling or something in Washington, D.C., a very good firm. It wasn't Covington. I don't remember what it was. But then after 1 year, he quit to go into some public policy group advocating for something. I don't know what it was. He was there for 1 year or 6 months and realized he didn't want to do it anymore. No one was hiring him because he left and he went into a completely different practice setting. So they figured he'd do it away. And the only job he was able to get was as a staff attorney in a mid-sized firm in Ohio. And he wasn't from Ohio. He was from like Northern Virginia, where he grew up. And that's all he was able to get. And then when he tried to get jobs, no one was interviewing him. And he thought there was something wrong with me because he was only trying to go to big firms. You have to be very careful. And then so he just stayed a staff attorney. And not only was he paid less, but this particular firm paid staff attorneys like half of what they did. And so you just need to be very careful. And then sometimes you may be wanting to join a firm that has a practice area that gives you where you can develop an interest in a certain subject matter and that you can't do at a firm because it's not available. So sometimes you may have an interest in that and you maybe have a very strong interest in that. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing work that you don't enjoy. And by the way, your practice area, the more you like it and the more committed you are to it and the more it interests you, the more you're likely to do well. If you love something, if you don't like tennis, you're probably not going to be a professional tennis player, right? if you don't like your practice area, you're not going to be doing what you like most. So attorneys will move firms all the time to get more specialized work. Now you frame your resume like you look like more of a specialist, but you may not be getting the work you want. So people move jobs where you're getting more work in your specialty. So that's very important. Now, I'm not saying to switch practice areas. If you switch practice areas and you're at an AmLaw 100 law firm, you are not going to get a job in another AmLaw 100 law firm if it's a big switch. So say litigation to corporate or real estate to patent law. Like, you're going to need to move significantly down to a firm that doesn't pay as much, that is taking a risk on you, and you probably need to even move into another market to like a mid-size or smaller firm, because that's the firms that are going to take a risk on you. But you may want to switch practice areas. Who should switch practice areas? Imagine if you were an attorney and you worked as a nurse for 5 years before going to law school, and then maybe you worked in an administrative role in a hospital for 1 or 2 years after that, and then you go to law school, and then you come out and you get a job doing something completely different. People like that may want to try to switch firms and get into healthcare. And then just better opportunity for advancement. I covered that already, so I don't want to go into too much opportunity, but you may know you don't have any advancement potential. There are certain firms, Cravath and places like that, where they just don't make partners. Is it worth it for you to stay there? It may be, but and they do make partners, of course, but very few. If it's so remote that it's not going to happen, maybe you want to go someplace where that can happen, because that may make you happier. There are certain firms, like big New York firms, that are so difficult to make partnership in. The only possible option is to become counsel, and counsel rarely become partners. And then your salary is kind of capped. You're not expected to get business. You may be a second-class citizen. You have the name of the firm behind you. But sometimes the compensation system at your firm is not good. So we talked about salaries, but I'm constantly representing partners where their compensation is such that they would make a lot more money at different firms. So if you can make more money at a different firm, then it's very important that you maybe go to another firm. So this is just for partners, but sometimes partners will be hired and the law firm will say, we will guarantee you $600,000 a year for the next 2 years. And then if you bring in this much business, we'll pay you this percentage. And based on your current book, we'll make an extra $300,000 or something. And then at the end of 2 years, they'll say, we can't afford to pay you $600,000 anymore. And we're going to give you a lower percentage of your business. But because things are slow, when they improve, we'll give you a higher. They rarely change that. So partners get screwed over, the word to say, all the time. And that's possible. And then sometimes they just say there's no opportunities. So if there's no opportunities, you're unable to create them, you need to look at new firms. And if there's opportunities for advancement, there's a sense of enthusiasm. People are working harder. People are doing better work for clients. The firm may, but they're not always doing better work for clients. But the sense of that the ability to advance is something that means the firms like you bring in new people. Again, younger, good firms that are newer, that are bringing in people, often have more opportunities for advancement than large institutional firms that don't make anybody a partner, because they need more partners. They want to convey opportunity to people that are taking a risk and leaving big firms to join them if they're new and they have big clients. So if there's no opportunity, you need to move. Now there's BCG articles that you should write down. There's one, and all you do is you search Google and you'll there's one, Find Your Tribe or something that I think is my best article on it, where you talk about working with people that are like you. There's another one called Firm Culture Matters Most, which I wrote probably 20 plus years ago, but that's a good one. But if you're a fit for the culture of the firm, and you should also search, by the way, harrisonbarnes.com, and then articles about employer culture, because this is important. But if you're a fit for the firm culture, then those people are going to understand you. They're going to identify with you. And if you're in the wrong culture, then you may be excluded. They may not like you. Some law firms are surrounded by, I hate to say it, but they're made up of certain ethnic groups. Like I had one candidate in a religious group even. So if you're not part of that group and everybody is, that doesn't mean that people are prejudiced, but it may mean that they all go to church together. They all are whatever, and they all are athletes or former, all these things. So you need to surround yourself with people that are like you. But the biggest benefit of that is your happiness. Like, you're going to be happier when you're with people that are like you. This is just an example. When I was in middle school, and I gave the example earlier, I was in a private school that was very regimented, had all these rules, and it was not even that good. They did send a lot of kids in my class to Ivy League schools. I mean, it's actually not true, but they had all these rules. And a lot of people that went to the school, their parents had gone to the school. They were high up in the automotive industry. I was in a city called Grosse Pointe. They were from old money, so their families could have given a lot of money. And I went in there, and not that they were like this with everyone, but I was given all C's from everything: physical education, English. The school didn't like me. I think the parents talked about it. The school people talked about it because it was small. So everything I did wrong was seen in a negative way. I even studied for my exams, and I thought got perfect grades, and they still gave me C's. So they just didn't like me. And again, I was probably not doing the best work. But the next year, I went to a school that was exceptional. I think it was ranked one of the top 10 schools for high schools in terms of test scores and college admissions in the United States. Incredible school, meaning the school that I first went to might have been ranked 200 or 500 or something. This school was ranked like number 7. So I went to this school, and suddenly I was doing the same thing, but getting incredibly positive feedback and great grades. And it was just a different culture. It was a different type of people. The original school, people were wearing suits every day, and you were graded based on if you were wearing an Hermes tie or Brooks Brothers tie. It was crazy. It was just a different culture, and I excelled. You have to be in the right law firm culture. Sometimes it can be geographic in nature. You might be a better fit for a Chicago firm than a New York firm. You might be a better fit for a Los Angeles firm than a Chicago firm or a Miami firm. Different firms have different culture. Different firms in different cities have different culture. You have to understand that many times what happens to attorneys is they go to firms in New York or big cities, not just New York. They work so hard and they're so beat down that when they leave, they never want to work in a law firm again. But in contrast, attorneys who start their careers in smaller markets, like I said earlier, often don't leave because maybe they're from that smaller market and they understand everybody there, and they're people that they know, and they know the clients, and there's a connection. And it just doesn't matter. You need to work with people that you like and you feel comfortable with. And sometimes attorneys that are having problems, it's just culture. I remember, I don't know, but sometimes you might be too nerdy, or you might not be nerdy. There's just different things that are rewarded in different cultures. That's how it is. Sometimes everybody will have gone to the same law school and you didn't, and they'll bond on that. So I've written a lot about it. Search for this. It's extremely important. I just recommend reading it. And then sometimes people just make mistakes. They make mistakes that are social in nature. They get drunk at a Christmas party and everyone thinks negative of them. Sometimes they may have had a sexual relationship, made a pass at the wrong person. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes you made a huge mistake, done something wrong. So here's some things. People get drunk and they say dumb things at parties, or they just get drunk. I saw someone, I told an example recently, a partner at a major law firm, an equity partner that didn't even think he had too much to drink, but he was standing in front of a bunch of other partners and got into a taxi or a car and fell down and hit his head or something. And everyone thought it was because he was drunk. And then all these other partners he was working with, talking about and having rumors. And so he felt like he needed to leave. So attorneys get in trouble for this all the time. Every firm that I've been at, either as a summer associate or when they had summer associates in their class, always had summer associates that did something stupid and got drunk or made something else. So people, again, you're in a law firm and everything is serious and you're not relating to people. You go to a function, you have a few drinks, and all of a sudden you open up and you say things that you're thinking that you normally wouldn't say, and you screw things up. Those sort of errors can hurt you. They expect you to be in control, and you're supposed to be doing that for your clients as well. So again, I see this all the time, and you just need to be careful. Political squabbles are another one. You need to be careful about that. So law firms, the partners always get in fights, and sometimes there's a losing side and they leave because of that. Being on the wrong side of people that are in power can also hurt you. They'll give you poor reviews. They'll keep your compensation from increasing. They'll make you endure all sorts of other unpleasantries. So you need to be very careful about that as well. You may be just the people in power may not like you. Sometimes the people in power, by the way, I had one candidate that had graduated from unaccredited law school in California, and then over the next several years had gotten eventually an M at Harvard. And so somehow he got into, because of the LLM from Harvard, he got into a huge, very prestigious New York office of a Los Angeles office of a New York law firm. He got there and no one would give him work. People were like, we're not going to, he was hired maybe by people in the New York office. People in LA were like, we're not going to hire this person or give this person work. You don't want to stay. And that's actually not a mistake. So I shouldn't actually probably have given that example, but it's helpful. A significant portion of the partners and associates I work with are looking for positions due to be on the wrong side of people in power. Sometimes you make mistakes in legal matters. You may have done something wrong. You may have made a mistake where you said something that wasn't true. And if you say, and you just did something that could have exposed a firm to malpractice, or maybe you did. And if you do that, you're just damaged goods. Some law firms will forgive it, but most will always remember it. And it's not something that you want to have. And then those law firms will stop giving you work and you just, or people may just not give you as important work if they need you. These are often so large that it will hit you like a perpetuity if you stay at the firm. I was working with one woman that was a senior associate at a major US law firm, and she had made a mistake as a fourth year. She was a ninth year and was wondering if she was up for partner or they were going to advance her. And they said, probably not, because you tainted your brand when you did something 5 years ago. That's what they told her. So this stuff, she wasted her time. I've seen people miss court and sleep in, and that can crowd you. I've seen people that are making mistakes that are fired, are not fired, but things happen. So if you've done that and you don't have political capital and no one has your back and you feel like you've made too serious a mistake, then that's a problem. Sometimes you'll just take too much time off work or have very low billable hours. I saw an attorney at a major US law firm that decided to take 4 weeks of paternity leave when no partner or anyone had ever done that. He thought that was okay. He came back to the firm and he was iced out. No one gave him any work. I'm not saying that happens at every firm. If everyone's doing that, it's probably okay. But if you're the first person to do it, something like that, you need to be careful. If you take too much time at work, people aren't going to like it. If you're taking constant vacations, people aren't going to like it. The big associates in law firms, especially if you're in a large class, they're always calling the herd. They want the people to advance that are doing things their way. So hours, commitment, doing things that the law firm doesn't like are difficult to change. And you may sometimes make a flippant remark as well. I've seen one flippant remark just made to the wrong person, hurt someone for their career. Some firms are very uptight, others aren't. I saw one partner, one candidate not too long ago, very early in his career, go to a partner like 6 months in, and he was given an assignment and he said, this isn't necessary because this firm is this or whatever, because this law doesn't supports our case, you don't need it, or this, I don't know what it was. He was actually let go because of that. Is a 6-month attorney, and it was a young partner that was very excited to have the work and billing the client money, and this basically stopped it. And he was very upset, and it would have stopped it. He acted like he would make problems and tell other people that. And not only that, but because I got him 2 jobs, a good job. Like one of them I think was Quinn Emanuel, and the other was a good one. It was like Boyce Schiller or something. But the firm he was at was so big that those firms had conflicts with clients, and so he didn't get a job at those firms. Either of them didn't have an opening, and then he ended up stopping the search and setting up a solo practice. So you just need to be very careful. And now he's actually doing very well. But if you upset the wrong person, you can get blackballed. So you need to be careful about that. That's why you need to watch yourself. Don't put yourself in situations where bad things are going to happen. And if you can, just don't drink in social situations. Don't spend too much time with people and let them know you in your intimate details because they may not approve. I saw an attorney get blackballed because he was at a event and some wife of a partner flirted with him, and the partner was extremely upset because nothing like this has ever happened. He thought his relationship was basically this person was out to get them, and successfully got other partners and think that didn't work. So affairs are dangerous. Everyone always finds out about affairs because people don't keep their mouth shut and tell other people. They tell friends and at the firm or others, and then everyone finds out about it. Some law firms don't like it very much at all. I've seen one law firm where this is how archaic some things are, but sometimes the woman is penalized more than the man, or the man's penalized as horribly as if he did something horribly wrong. I saw one partner that was a major partner at one of the top 10 law schools or top 10 law firms in the country, had a $30 million book of business, which is incredible. He had an affair not an affair, he wasn't married. And the person he had an affair with wasn't married, but they were a paralegal. And because he was considered a attorney in a controlling role in the firm, he was fired. And because he was fired, he couldn't get a job in another law firm and ended up going to work with a private equity firm or something. This is how things happen. So you need to be very careful about relationships. They always say for men, don't dip your pen in corporate ink. And then there's probably a similar thing for women. But a lot of times people will have affairs with their mentor. Other times will just be relationships. It's very uncomfortable for other people in the firm because sometimes they know if they critique you harshly or they critique your maid harshly, that you'll be mad at them and hold that against someone. And it just creates problems. It's not worth it, man. People do it, and there's people that are married in firms, but you just need to be incredibly careful. Many times you'll be with a mentor. So you'll be with someone that's giving you a lot of work and they're mentoring you. And it's a man or it's a woman. And you travel together on cases and you go out to drinks and hotels or have dinner, and things lead to one thing and another. And all of a sudden you've hurt your relationship with a supporting person in the firm. Then everyone knows about it because you may tell one friend, and that friend will spread rumors and tell one person, that person will tell another. So eventually things will go wrong in that affair. Sometimes the attorney will be in the affair, the partner will end it, the junior associate will end it. But even when things are going well, if you get a good recommendation from that mentor, then people will be suspicious of it because they will know that. So regardless, junior careers attorneys are damaged when they're in a position when they have relationships with senior attorneys, even if you don't think anybody knows. The same thing with attorneys often having issues with their peers, because one person can end the relationship, the other can accuse them of sexual harassment, which I've seen a bunch of times. You just need to be careful, especially partners having relationships with secretaries and paralegals and junior attorneys. That often ends in accusations of just all sorts of things. Avoid it. But you will get penalized for psychiatric issues, for substantive issues, and so forth. You do not tell people that you have these problems. You do not tell anyone in the firm that you have these problems. You do not, you keep this quiet. You say, I have a medical condition if you need to take time off. You do not talk about this. And I'm sorry to bring this up because people think that they can't, but you do not talk about these things because that's how you will be labeled. You will be labeled as an alcoholic. You will be labeled as someone who's crazy. You will be labeled for all these things. I read a book recently, and it was a book by a woman that had worked in a law firm and had bipolar disorder and was taking lithium or something for it. There was a story about her time in a law firm. It wasn't specifically about her mental illness, but she said she was at a meeting with this expert they were hiring, and he was the best expert in the country for what they needed someone for. And then he said a couple hours into the meeting, I guess they were at dinner or something, hey, I need to go take my lithium. And at that point, all of the partners basically started laughing. He went to the car or whatever and were saying bad things about him and being like, we never use this guy. I can't believe you made this mistake. And she realized that if she ever said anything about her lithium, it would be like that. Same thing with alcoholism, other problems. You just can't tell anyone. I'm sorry, but this is how you will be defined. Now, are there firms where they're cool about that? Sure. But if you have problems and people know, and you think they're dealing with you differently, and you think that's going to hurt you, you need to be careful. You also need to be careful about who you tell about things. You need to be careful about joining groups for people like that on Facebook or other places that people may see you. You just need to really be quiet about this stuff. This is not something that you can talk about like you might be able to in the entertainment industry or other types of industries. You just need to be careful because attorneys are expected to be in control. The other one is lying. If you're caught lying, again, it completely undermines your trust. An example that I've told before is had an attorney that I knew, and they were at a firm, not any place I'd ever worked at, and they were asked if they sent a letter. They told the partner that they'd sent the letter, and they hadn't sent the letter. As a matter of fact, they had it like almost complete, but it wasn't. The attorney looked it up on the system and saw that the person was 2 weeks away from making partner, and the firm was so mad they fired the person. So you just have to be honest. And if you get caught, it's going to hurt you. Now, I don't think firing was appropriate, but that's what happened. Sometimes you get doing something illegal and you'll get fired. So I saw someone get fired for doing, that's actually, you would probably not think that, for soliciting someone for online sex, and that happened. But anyway, so yeah, doing something that's illegal that the firm finds out about can get you into trouble. That means DUIs and things can hurt you. Getting sued can hurt you. A firm getting sued for something you've done can hurt you. That's why you just don't even want to put yourself in those situations, and just all sorts of minefields that you need to really be aware of. And if the firm finds out about it, you do need to leave, because it's going to taint your reputation, all the political capital you built up. Unless that stuff has been done by partners and they're still fine, you'll have problems. You don't want to harm your reputation. And then this is a final one that I really want to bring up. And then I'm done and we'll go to questions. But I'm sorry this was a bit long of a presentation, but this is just all extremely important stuff. So you need mentors in any firm to advance. If no one's going to be your mentor, that means that they don't have something to offer you, or they can't help you advance. So most law firms, to make you partner, you will need a mentor that sticks up for you. You need a mentor to protect you from information about people and things you don't know, to steer you in the right direction. Just like anybody, people need good advisors, people need other people. That's what a mentor is. And you just need to have people that are giving you work, that are helping you, moving you along. You need that to make partners, but you also need that to get work. You need that to feel secure. You need that to do all these different things. I remember when I was applying to college, and so I went to this number 7 in the country ranked grade school. I don't know if it's ranked or high school, and they had pulled some colleges, and so I had this advisor who's very smart. He went to Yale and all these other things, and he said, my junior year, I was last semester, like 2 or 3 weeks after school. He said, "Where do you want to go to school for college?" And I said, "I really would like to go to Harvard or some other Ivy League school." And he said, "I don't think that's going to happen." And I said, "Oh, Chicago." I said, "I want to go to University of Chicago or these 2 Ivy League schools." And he said, "Okay, then you'll go to Chicago if that's the one you want. You're not going to go to this other school." And he said, and so what does that mean? It means that sometimes the school would get behind certain people and they would push the admissions office to admit certain people and not others. There were better people than me, I don't know. But that's what a good mentor can do. I saw another girl, this is a story I told the other day. She had applied for a Rhodes Scholarship and with myself and had moved pretty far along the process. But she had an advisor that was very, very high ranking person at the University of Chicago Law School. And he did the same thing. He's like, "Where do you want to go to law school?" And she said, "I would love to go to Stanford as my first choice. And I'm applying to these other schools." And he said, "Okay, we'll try to make Stanford happen." She got her LSAT results basically like on a Thursday or something, did well, and then sent her application off to Stanford. He said, "Just be sure to apply early." Sent it off like on a Thursday. And this is when everyone used mail, things weren't electronic. Then the following Friday, when admissions decisions weren't even going to come out until March, and we're talking about her getting these results maybe in February or something. I don't know what the results were, but she sent her an application out like on a Thursday, and on the following Friday got an acceptance letter from Stanford Law School. this is what mentors can do for you. Meaning they hadn't even admitted their class and sent out acceptance letters yet, but she got into the school. She got her application turned around in 8 days. Think about that. Or no, not even that, because it took 3 days to send something from Chicago to Palo Alto and then 3 days back. So literally she was just marked to be admitted. And she wasn't like a 180 4.0. She was like maybe high 160s on her LSAT, something like that. This is what it can do. So you need a champion. This is what happens in law firms. You need someone to get behind you and ensure that you have access to work, that you get advanced, and has someone to defend you when work gets slow and there's layoffs, and also when it comes time to make partner. So you get laid off and you don't have people that believe in you, that aren't defending you. And those partners typically need to be people with work. And you also need people that are going to stick up for you. That if people are partners with work, if someone else is criticizing you and treating you unfairly, that person will step in and say, hey, this is my person. If you mess with them, I'm not going to give you work. So almost all successful attorneys have people that have their backs. I'll tell you one final story and then we'll go to conclusions, take a quick break, and then come back. But I had one final story. Is I was talking to this partner, this guy that left a huge firm and started his own practice. And he said to me, the reason he left, and he was a great attorney, another top law school, and lots of hours in his firm. He said, I could have found someone to stick up for me and help me make partner. I didn't work hard enough at getting a good mentor. And so I just felt it was time for me to leave. So, I mean, he left because he didn't have a mentor and someone that would stick up for them, because that's what you need at firms. Just a lot of people need to leave law firms and look for new jobs. Again, if you're asked to leave, you definitely have to leave. And then you just evaluate that and move as quickly as possible. But once a law firm has asked you to leave, you need to leave now. And the law firm doesn't want you. It's bad for your mental health to stay there. You need to find a job as quickly as you can and look for a new position. You may feel that you don't belong there. You may be unhappy. You need to leave. Ill at ease is something that's common. But again, if you're unhappy with the people, the environment, you need to leave. So I'm going to take a quick break. And then when I come back, I will. Again, I apologize for the webinar, but it was very important. And I'll be back shortly. Thank you. So this is Q&A. It's actually my favorite part of the week. And I love answering questions. Let me see. I call it Q&A actually. And I'll answer pretty much. I usually stay. This was a long presentation today. I can't believe it was over 2 hours. It's like a movie. But I always, especially people that stay, I just would say actually very smart, because every point that we covered today is something that could really make a massive difference in your career and your success and all that sort of thing. Just great work showing up in this webinar, because it's obviously very helpful for people that are looking for jobs and then not looking for jobs, but just in the job market, and then staying on this webinar because it's very long. But it's very good information. And each of these points could dramatically improve your career. Also, if you feel that you didn't understand everything, you want to go back, I will post this webinar on the BCG website within the next week or so. And when that goes up, I don't do that with all the webinars, but when that goes up, I will make sure that I cover that. So I'm going to take these questions, not necessarily in the order they were received. I'm going to go back to some of them and later. But it says, this particular question is, I've always been passionate about environmental law, but my current firm does primarily corporate litigation. Would switching to a firm that specializes in environmental law not align better with my interests? Yes. So that's very smart. But if you switch to a firm that does environmental law, you typically you have two types of firms. The first is in corporate law, corporate litigation is called commercial litigation, but I think that's actually good. You call it corporate litigation, because that will help me in what we call jobs at BCG. But that means commercial litigation. So commercial litigation can be a lot of different things. Sometimes it involves environmental law. But if you have a job with a firm that does environmental litigation, then you will often be better switching to that firm. One of the things, if that's really what you want to do. But the problem with switching to those firms is you don't always know if you're really going to be doing environmental litigation, or if they're going to give it to you and you're being hired for a commercial litigation attorney. Usually when you move to a firm that's doing work differently. You're not going to be working at prestigious of a firm, but sometimes you are. What does that mean? That just means that you may need to move down in type of firm. The other issue is, are you going to be doing a plaintiff or defense? So what happens to a lot of attorneys is they move to firms to do environmental because they've done all this environmental advocacy, and they may actually be more suited to doing plaintiff's work where they're sticking up for people that are polluting. Whereas if you do defense, you're actually representing, you're sticking up for people that are against polluters and things and trying to enforce environmental things. Whereas if you move to defense, you're doing the opposite. So this is a big question to ask. The other question to ask, which is important, is that what's interesting about environmental law was a big practice area in the late 70s to the mid 90s. And then all of a sudden it started falling off the face of the earth. And it's also, the environmental law is also often controlled by the state of who's the president, who's not. So Democratic presidents will obviously be all for environmental regulation, meaning they will create work, and Democrat and Republican legislatures will be against it. So environmental is a risky practice area because depending on the administration or depending on laws getting overturned, you may not have work. And so if that's the case, you want to be very careful about the practice area that you're getting at, the practice area you're choosing. So environmental is a risky one because there's some very good firms, by the way, some excellent firms, but you have to worry about that. For environmental attorneys or for minority attorneys who have experienced microaggressions or subtle forms of discrimination in law firms, what steps should they take to address these issues before considering a career movement? When is it appropriate to move on if these issues persist? Okay, so that's fine. This is a good question. It's also a landmine, so I don't want to get in trouble by saying things that might be true but are offensive. And I've actually, if you're interested, I'm the only person in the United States to write a book about diversity in American law firms. So search about that, and it's on BCG under Harrison Barnes. So just do a search. Search on Google, and you'll find it. So this is an important thing to look at, and the only reason would be there's so much to talk about when it comes to diversity-related issues inside of law firms that if you don't review this, you will approach it from the wrong way. So a couple things to understand. So the first thing is law firms actually do need minority attorneys. They need them because the clients demand them. So there are certain law firms that the clients basically say, if you don't have any diversity work, we're not going to hire all white labor and employment attorneys to fight discrimination suits, or we're not going to hire you if you have this. And so they lose work. So there's actually a real demand for minority attorneys, more so than in a lot of other practice areas, and than you would think. So there is a demand. But the problem is that there are some people that are older that think negatively of people from certain backgrounds, or people that believe that the person may have gotten into a certain law school because of their law schools trying to get diversity. And it doesn't have to be Black, or it could be the schools seeking people from super rural areas. I mean, I don't know, but you don't know. And I don't know that that's really a form of diversity, but the point is that you need to understand that. Now, something interesting that I've noted, and I don't like saying this, but I'm going to say it, and I don't want to be told I'm racist or something for this, but a lot of times when people come from environments where there's no racism against them, meaning you may have grown up in an American city where there's no racism or market, but a lot of times you may come from another country, like you might be directly, like if you're Black, you might be from Africa. If you're Indian, you might be from India. Any group that you can think of that there's discrimination against. Sometimes if they're coming out of another environment, and not America, but another environment, then they don't see racism. They just approach things differently because there's not that historical racism in the country. So you have to sometimes ask, is this microaggression real or is it not? And is it something that you can overcome? So I know people that sometimes if you've experienced something in the past, you may be looking for that. One thing that I've experienced is like, this is just a psychological issue, but it's codependent. It's like where I get really dependent on my mate or something. And because I have this thing that was caused by probably my relationship with my father and mother growing up, I look at my relationship in a codependent way because of all these things, the way I was treated. So sometimes if you come out of an environment where there is a lot of racism, you may see things that are racism that are not. So you don't know if it's microaggressions, you don't know what it is, but you need to be very careful about sometimes seeing things in a certain way. People that come out of, this is another example. And again, I'm not trying to say that what you're experiencing isn't real, but it's important to understand. So people that come out of very public interest and environments where they're helping the poor and where they're very into those things and they don't trust large corporations, these people get jobs in major American law firms. But then they look at all these corporate clients as evil and they do a bad job, even though, and they're not committed to the work because they think they're representing the wrong people. That's a way of seeing things that is actually hurting those people. And it's the same thing with far right people. So my objective, like what I would try to do with all these microaggressions is see if they're really holding you back. And if they are holding you back and you believe that you won't have them in another law firm, or then you need to go and leave. So that's true if you believe that they're going to actually hold you back and prevent you from advancing. And law firms, by the way, have a very difficult time holding on to people that are just different things. It could be people that are gay. It could be people that are handicapped. It could be people that are a certain race. It could be people, all these different things. And you may feel that's holding you back. And if it is, then maybe it's time to leave. So one of the most common things is I'm in this business group where we can't get women to join. And we also can't get the people that are different ethnic groups we can't hold on to. And the group is in Los Angeles. And because there's a lot of these people, a lot of them are Persian, Iranian, because they have businesses that are successful. So they have there's just different things. I think this is a very good question. My advice would be to make sure the microaggressions are real. Understand if you're seeing things that someone else in your situation might not be seeing, because if you're a hammer, all you is a nail. So you just need to understand that. And then you should read this book about diversity in law firms, because it shows you what really are microaggressions. And then it shows you the law firms trying to struggle to hire people and a lot of other stuff. And again, I apologize for everyone that doesn't experience this, that I spend so much time on it, but it's a very important question because people will make life choices based on this. If you move too many firms, by the way, it doesn't matter what your diversity level is. If you move firms too much, law firms won't trust you and they'll think that maybe you're not doing good work and that's why you're moving. So you have to this goes for all attorneys. I've recently taken on a mentorship within my role, and I'm sure if it isn't sufficient to achieve meaningful advancement, should I consider? So this is the thing. So mentors in law firms are often, and I'm not trying to be mean here, in law firms are often attorneys without business and this is mentors when it's like group mentors. So business, and I would just say group mentors, meaning all junior attorneys or all summer associates. So these people are often people without business and a lot of work. That's just how it is, because they think is a better use of their time it's a better use of their time giving these people work, giving these people that to do, as opposed to working with clients. Basically, they say you can babysit children and we're going to go out and do this stuff. So I'm not saying that's always the case, but if it is, you may be being painted into that role. So this is a very good question. This is an excellent question, because this is how things work. So if you're in that role, then you do want to be careful and to make sure the reason you're in that role, that you can advance out of that role. So I would just say prove you are more than a mentor, than a group mentor, if that makes sense. I'm sorry to be harsh about that. I mean, but that's just how it works. So just think about that. But yeah, it can, if you want to move to another firm that's more conducive and to growth. I remember it was like my first year of recruiting. I would see someone that was a partner at a big firm, and I would be like, wow, you're amazing. I want to talk to you. And they might not even have a business because they didn't really understand the business yet. And I remember a couple of these partners came in and they said, I'm a great mentor and a firm should be doing the summer associate program and doing this. And even then, I knew that wasn't enough to advance someone. I knew that there needed to be more than that. I'm just bringing that up to you because being a mentor is sometimes a dead end, and it's something that they give to people that aren't necessarily the people that they think are going to make. Okay, so that, by the way, this next question I'm answering is with someone who's logged in to Zoom and who's logged in with their name. And so if your name shows up when I'm answering questions, I won't display your name. I'm just going to type it out like this instead of just displaying the question. So anyone that's worried about their name being displayed, I never display the name because I know people want to be private. Okay, how come attorneys have a bad taste for those attorneys or law students that fight for people and their constitutional rights, regardless, this is a good question, regardless of them being guilty? I've seen attorneys as well as DAs know the law and that the law has been broken, but continue to prosecute and convict a person wrongly. Why does an attorney spend more time in school? Does the attorney not fight for a client? Okay, so I would say, how come law firm attorneys? That's a good question. So law firm attorneys are more often than not paid by people who are fighting on some side of this, who have violated others' constitutional rights. As an attorney, you want to have money. So if you're fighting for someone's constitutional rights, now this is not saying white collar criminal, but if you are fighting for someone's constitutional rights, then you're working for someone more often than not that doesn't have arms. So that's how that works. So law firms work for people that have money. So most of them. And so if you want to make a good salary, sorry, I don't think that's wrong. So if you're fighting for someone that doesn't have money, then all you're doing, you're representing the wrong side. And if you're representing the wrong side, everything is going to be from the side of the attorney of the person who doesn't have money, and that may be what you do. Now, DAs and so forth are hired. It's constitutional. DAs and so forth are hired as white-collar criminal defenses, and they're able to switch sides and become a prosecutor to a white-collar defendant. But the point is, most of the time, that's the kind of stuff you're interested in, fighting for people that may have been wrongly, I don't know. But then many times you're going to be working for people without money. And therefore, you'll see the world that way. And so law firms want to hire a certain type of people that are that way. Okay. Okay, so this is just a procedural question. DAs. So if a DA believes that there's a plausible case that someone that robbed a store or did someone, then the person has to take the side of the state or the county or the country, and they have to prosecute. And they won't prosecute if they think they're going to lose, because they're evaluated based on their success rate. But they have to prosecute if they think they'll win, and if there's more of a chance that I don't know what's wrong or win, and if there's more of a chance that they will win rather than lose. Okay, next question, and thank you everyone who's asking these questions. These are very helpful to everyone on this call. What advice do you have for attorneys who fear that their past mistakes, whether public or private, might resurface and negatively affect their reputation with the legal community if they stay at their current firm? Okay, so there's different types of mistakes. There's mistakes that may be reported in newspapers. There's mistakes that may be private, that may be part of your criminal record or something, or arrest. There's mistakes that you arrest. There's mistakes you made with psychotic people, with bad people, and I'll talk about each of these. Bad, angry people. There's mistakes that you made at a previous firm that you were fired for. And then there's mistakes that you made at your current firm, just work mistakes, which would be bad law, textual, bad statements. Okay, so these are all mistakes that you may have made. These are the mistakes that you can make. So if you made a mistake and it was reported in the newspaper or some sort of publication, and it's showing up when people search for your name, then you have to get it off the first page of Google. There's ways to do that. Essentially, you make a lot of social media accounts, and then with those social media accounts, you make sure that you build links to them from other sources, and then they will start showing up. Basically, maybe you do a blog, but you build links to those, and eventually, meaning you post links in your other social media accounts, you can do that, and then eventually those news stories will go on the second page, and people probably won't find them. So you do that, and that's right. Or you can hire a reputation management firm to do that for you. So that's one way. And then the next way, criminal records and arrest. Most criminal records, if it's a misdemeanor or something, you can just file a request. You can file something, go to the judge, and ask to have it expunged. And in most cases, most misdemeanors, and not felonies, but most misdemeanors will be expunged. And you can explain you're an attorney and you made these mistakes and whatever. And most times the judge will expunge. So that could be a DUI, it could be an assault, I don't know, but it could be, will be expunged. It could be going way over the speed limit. So it's just, there's all sorts of things. So those will be expunged. But really, most of that stuff is never, most law firms do not check your criminal record and so forth. Maybe the major ones do, but most of them are made. Sometimes, I've had this with me before, someone that's psychotic, maybe it's an ex-girlfriend, maybe it's someone, boyfriend, maybe it's an angry relative, will call up the firm and say negative things about you and that you're all these awful things. And most of the time that's happened with people. I've had people where I had a guy that was in a foreign country that had an issue with one of my candidates or one of my recruiters. It was calling up and threatening to blow up our building and all this stuff, but I didn't listen to whatever they were saying. So most firms will not take it seriously, but sometimes they will. And so you have to be careful about that. You just have to be careful of who you associate with and people if you were fired from a previous firm, you have to be careful about that. You have to, and if you were fired, meaning you did something wrong and the firm, something very bad, and the firm finds out about it. I had a case where someone had been fired for doing something wrong. That was bad. I don't know exactly what it was, from a firm in Wisconsin. They were a patent prosecutor with great qualifications. Then they had been not working for a year or something after being fired. Then they started applying to other firms in that Wisconsin city, and they got a job, and they started the job. And 1 week later, someone from the previous firm called up and talked to a partner or something and said what the person had done. So, because they saw them that they had been fired as part of a press release or something. If you do something really bad, depending on the firm, I think in large markets at big firms, they'll never say anything. It's just the way people act at big firms. They don't talk negatively about people, even when they leave. I've seen people fired from giant firms for doing stuff that's incredible, and the firms won't say anything because that's like how it works. But in smaller firms, a lot of times they don't have that ethic or way of thinking, and they will call up and talk to people and feel like they're getting back. For some reason, that happens a lot with patent attorneys. I don't really know why. The patent attorneys tend to be unbelievably harsh with each other, and it tends to be a small bar. Whereas in other practice areas, it doesn't happen. I've had friends that were partners, and I would, not candidates, but talk about other attorneys that we knew, and bad things happened to them at that firm. These are people that I may have worked with. They never would say anything negative about someone that left. They just don't do it. But the biggest firms don't do that. The most prestigious firms never do that. Basically because they don't want to talk. They don't want to have a bad reputation themselves, but bad things happen. So they're very protective. It's the smaller firms that aren't part of the real establishment. Many times will do that. So that's a good point, and it's something to think about. So if you're in a firm where you think that could happen, then sometimes most firms will not take it. Most firms will not. And sometimes you have to be careful with that. With smaller firms and smaller markets. And then if you do something at your current firm, make a work mistake, do something bad with the law, do something sexually, make a bad statement, the largest firms often will not fire you because they don't want to get sued. So large firms will often not fire you, and they have the money to keep you around. So it's just easier for them to not fire you because if they do, they'll have to waste their attorney's time with depositions and all this crap. So they won't fire you. Some of them will, if it's really bad. But if it's not that bad, like it's bad but not that bad, they won't fire you, but they'll stop giving you work. And then you'll sit around because they believe it's better to spend $250,000 on your salary for a year with you not working than it is for them to defend a lawsuit. So they're making a calculation. So if that starts happening because of a mistake, then then you need to start looking. And so a lot of times to figure that out, the law firms will ask you, how have your bill of hours been when they're interviewing your stuff? So you need to be careful about how you answer that question. Okay. So this is another question. The person says, how do I determine if there's generally not enough work for me at my current firm, and what steps do I need to take to address if I find myself in that situation? If there's not enough work for you personally at the firm, sometimes the slowdown could be temporary, or it could be something that will last a long time. What is a slowdown that will last a long time? Right now, there hasn't been any IPOs in a long time. If you're a corporate securities attorney that specializes in IPOs, you probably want to find someplace that has work. Sometimes the slowdown is because you're too senior. Sometimes the slowdown is because it's a giant firm and big clients aren't giving them work. So one of the things, I'll just tell you a quick story and then about this and how to address it. But during the last slowdown, which was like in 2008, 2009 or something like that, but there's been a slowdown since then, but that was the last big slowdown. We had offices around the country. Most of the people that were working in the big markets, new big markets, and so big firms, they sent everyone to big firms in the big markets, not just big firms, but smaller firms. But I said, send everyone to firms in the suburbs. Like those firms are going to get more work because their billing rates aren't as high. So the larger clients are going to send them work. Another example would be law firms in California. So there's a big slowdown in LA and the Bay Area. There's other areas, there's Fresno, there's Sacramento, and so a lot of times the work will go, the firms in the smaller to mid-sized markets will actually be busy as they ever are because the clients are sending them work instead of the more expensive firms. So many times you can keep yourself employed by starting to apply to those firms. This is a piece of advice that if you're on this call and you're in that situation, could save your career and you'll be making money when others aren't. So this is what I would do. But if there's not enough work at your firm, it could be temporary or it could be permanent. Meaning, so what happens in permanent, you will be shown the door. Because it doesn't make any sense for law firms to keep you around if there's no work for you. It's not smart. So they'll let you go. So what firms will often do, there's some big firms in the Bay Area that sometimes they will take their people that are in a certain practice area that have no work, which is generally corporate, and they will literally move them to separate floors or separate buildings and office parks and things where they're just everyone's sitting there without any work, which is almost like being, I don't want to use the word, in jail or something. So that's dangerous. So if you're in that way, you have to look for firms. But the biggest thing anybody can do is when there's a slowdown at your firm, you need to start looking for a position, and you need to do what other people aren't doing, is you need to move to larger firms. There's actually to smaller firms. So there's actually something that large firms do during slowdowns, which is actually pretty brilliant, but it doesn't benefit you. So I'll tell you this, and it's almost like off the record. It's not something I should be saying, but I'm not going to mention firm names. So what they will do with corporate and all these other practice areas where they don't have any work is they will start advertising that they have jobs in these practice areas. So they'll say, we're seeking corporate securities associates, when you know damn well the firm doesn't have any corporate securities. Or when interest rates go up, there's typically a major slowdown in real estate work. We're seeking real estate associates. So all they're doing essentially is they're building a database of candidates that they can contact because they contacted them when the market speeds up. Brilliant. So you may be applying to big firms when you know no one has any work, and these are not real jobs, and you're not going to get hired because no one has any work. The only people that may have work are firms in smaller markets that aren't getting a lot of applications that people are sending work to because their billing rates are lower, and those attorneys are also maybe less specialized and can give you work as a corporate generalist as opposed to just corporate M&A or something. Actually, M&A is doing fine right now, but it's important to understand that you want to work on that. This is a good, so that I hope that answers that question. This next question, could you offer some advice on how attorneys can effectively communicate their desire for more better training during the job interview process without appearing overly critical to their current or potential employers? Okay, so you'll often get the feeling, the firms will often tell you in the interview that they're going to give you better training. Sometimes they'll even tell you, hey, our associates typically will get, our associates are getting work or trained to generate business. We show them how to do it where other firms wouldn't. Sometimes they'll tell you those things. They'll usually talk about training. They'll talk about things. But if you're interviewing at a firm that laterally, you probably don't want to talk about training because then they're going to talk about or act like you don't have training because then they're going to be concerned that you don't have training. And training really, you don't talk about training specifically. It's basically the more work you have, the more training you're going to get. So law firms that are incredibly busy often won't even give reviews because they feel like there's no need to, they don't want to piss anybody off. So training is just important to talk about, but you don't want to ask too many questions. If you look at the roster of attorneys, and there's junior associates, mid-level associates, senior associates, counsel, that means that there's going to be people for you to go to ask questions. Where you're not going to get training, or where you can talk about not getting training sometimes, is if you're the only associate in the practice group and there's only one other partner, or the partner is in a different office. Then you can say, hey, I'd like to work more closely with different associates in my practice area because I'm the only associate there, or I'm the only associate in my office. Or I'd like to work in an office that's not all remote because I'd like to interact with people personally. Or I'd like to work with different people at different levels because I know that senior associates are going to see things differently. So you can say those things, and that's helpful. But that's not criticizing your current firm. That's just going to help you with this other stuff. Okay, let's see here. So this next one, how it changes the work arrangements, influence attorneys to stay at current law firm jobs, especially when they want to be closer to significant. So generally, when you go into firms, if they say, are you remote? And you can ask them, how remote they are. And if they say we're not remote, then you say that's great because I want to work in an office where everybody's there. I want more training. I want this. I want that. There's an article too about remote work arrangements on BCG, but that's important to talk about if you can do that. And then these remote jobs, I think, are very difficult to advance in because you're not forming personal relationships. People can't see your eyes when you talk, just all sorts of different things that are just interrelate closely, things that aren't necessarily going to help you. So you need to try to work in a firm where you can try to work directly with people. Sometimes there's firms that will make people partner and things that are only working 60% or 80% because they're raising kids or I don't know. But that's rare. There's very good firms that will do that. But many times those are not equity partnership jobs. Those are other jobs. Okay. So in the context of compensation, what role does specialization play? And how can attorneys leverage their experience to secure better compensation? So typically, the more specialized the attorney, the more money they make. That's just how it works. So the attorney is, the more money they make. That's just all there is to it. But one of the things I would say that's important is that applies, this particular issue, particular statement applies primarily to attorneys doing work on behalf of companies as opposed to individuals. Now, not all the time does that apply. So you might be like traumatic brain injury, personal injury attorney, that would pay more. Certain specialties within personal injury and law attorneys can pay more. But generally, the more specialized you are, the more money you're getting. A couple more questions, then we'll wrap this up. I had an entire career prior to law school. I've been a law clerk for 2 years and started my career as a lawyer. No, people do not care if you start at 40. 40 is young because you're not really considered older until you get in your 60s in the law firms or maybe your late 50s. So you don't have to bring it up. There are some law firms, like big law firms, where the retirement age is 59 and a half, and they're just serious about that. But people are living longer. Gosh sake, Trump is 8 years old. There's not really a lot of discrimination against older people now because people know that they can do the work. Okay, so I think that's about it for the questions. I certainly apologize for this webinar going so late. I wasn't expecting it to go so late, but it was a lot of information to cover. These questions are all very good. I hope this was helpful. And I do appreciate everyone spending this time on this. I think what you learned today could really be of tremendous help in your career, especially if you took notes. And sometimes even if you don't, when you're on these webinars and you may lose attention now and then and come back, you're still absorbing the information. This is very smart to be on these. I think the more of these you attend and the more questions you ask, the better career you'll have. And just not tooting my own horn, but there's not a lot of people to talk about this stuff. And I've been doing this for a long time, and that I always hear back from people that were actively engaged with this type of content from me. Years later, I get LinkedIn messages from them, emails and things every few weeks. And this stuff can really help you, regardless of the stage of your career, and whether you're a law student or an older attorney or a younger attorney, that can help. So I definitely appreciate everyone being here. And I got one more question. Okay, this other person asked, what is the job market like for a new attorney and professional engineer who graduated when 55? So that's a good question. It's definitely much harder to get a job, but the people that are likely to hire you are going to be solo attorneys in your market or very small law firms in your market, because it's harder for them to attract people. And if you start there, you can do very well. So I would recommend that. I would also recommend, if you're a professional engineer and you're interested in doing IP law, I would recommend taking the patent bar. That's what you're interested in, and then doing the same thing, trying to work for smaller firms. This is how people that are older get jobs. You're not going to get them at large established firms because, frankly, they want people that are younger with more energy. ability to stick around long and make partner and so forth. All right. Thanks, everyone, for being on this webinar. I'll be back next week. Hopefully, this won't be as long for you, but this is great information and definitely appreciate everyone taking the time today. Thank you.